Last person that emailed me, okay.
So, can we have the closed meeting certification read, please?
Yes, sir. I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
So all in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. We have appointments to make. There was a motion on that?
Yes, I would like to move that we appoint to the CRHA Board, Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority, the following two people. Alice Washington and Javier Rodelas.
Is there a second to the nominations?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We will begin the 6:30 PM business meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. Counselors, any announcements? We have
I have one for Mr. Alexan, his 15th annual Summer Think Shop. So I'll read this briefly. The Teen Creator TVO highlights 15th annual Summer Think Shop. Charlottesville, Virginia award winner, author, trailblazer, Mr. Alexan presents the 15th annual Summer Think Shop with this year's theme, Taking a Moment. The purpose of this event is to provide a fun, educational, and positive experience for area children, most of ages 6 through 12 summer campers. The event will be at the Burnley Moran Elementary School, Charlottesville, Thursday, July 20th at 11:30 a.m. to noon.
10:30.
Sorry, 10:30 a.m. to noon.
All right,
Yep.
thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
One other, got turned off there. Just one other announcement I wanted to mention that on Saturday, July 8th, which obviously is a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago, the Healthy Streets, Healthy People event was held at Washington Park. Counselors will recall that this was the item that we discussed where we wound up saying to the Parks and Rec staff, can you fix the sidewalks before that starts? And I'm pleased to report that the event started at 10 a.m. on July 8th, and at 6:30 p.m. on July 7th, I got the email message saying, yes, the sidewalks were fixed. Now the park was fully handicapped accessible. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to the Parks and Rec staff. Let them be publicly acknowledged because they really did work very fast and very well. So thank you all, Parks and Rec.
So it's one other quick announcement that on August 5th, it's West Haven Days, and I have it on a good authority that the mayor and vice mayor will be in the Duncan booth. So you want to please to come out. Chief Kochis, do I have you as well? So anyway, it's a great event. Please come out to support them. We won't be upset if you don't, take a ball and throw it at the Duncan booth, but it's a great event to see different community vendors and community supporters. So that's August 5th and start at 10 to like 6. They go all day. It's a great event.
One of the things I discovered in the dunk tank 4 years ago is that if the kids don't throw it hard enough, they get to come up and punch so, anyway, it is fun. Recognitions and proclamations.
Yes, I have one. July is Park and Recreation Month, and so I have a proclamation. It's a lot of whereases on this. I'm going to read a few of them. This is a great asset to the community, so Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of the communities throughout the country, including the city of Charlottesville, and where parks and recreation experiences are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the healthy lifestyle for all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of the community. Whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Park and Recreation Month. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Charlottesville that July and residents and visitors are encouraged to participate in the range of activities that help to make Charlottesville a vibrant community. Signed and sealed the 17th day of July 2023. J. Lloyd Snook, III, Mayor.
Thank you. Also, since we last gathered, I had occasion to execute another proclamation. This was a proclamation honoring Tito Durrett, who retired from the city of Charlottesville on effective June 30th. And June 29th, there was an event that I guess he probably wondered why his wife was taking him to the bowling alley at 11:30 in the morning. But it was for this occasion. And so anyway, we thanked him for his 30-plus years of service and wished him well in future endeavors. So that gets us to through to the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, would you like to read the consent agenda for us, please?
Consent agenda. Number 3, minutes, May 1st, council meeting, May 15th, council meeting, June 5th, council meeting, June 16th, special meeting, and June 23rd, special meeting. 4, resolution, Fontaine Avenue Fire Station Alerting System Update, second reading. 5, ordinance, Charlottesville Police Department Firearms Buyback Program and Destruction of Surrendered Firearms Ordinance, second reading. 6, resolution, appropriating city traffic assets insurance reimbursement, $56,316.53, one of 2 readings. 7, resolution, appropriating funds for the Virginia Department of Education Special Nutrition Program Summer Food Service Program, $100,000, one of 2 readings. 8, resolution, reallocating $33,827.85 of American Rescue Plan funds to the Department of Human Services from funds previously appropriated to City of Promise, one of 2 readings. 9, ordinance, approving a right-of-way encroachment agreement for 1117 Preston Avenue, one of 2 readings.
So we will now take public comment regarding items on the consent agenda that were just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. If you're on the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, press star 9. We will alternate in-person and virtual speakers. And this is literally just to talk about the things that are read on the consent agenda. So if you want to talk about anything coming up later on in the meeting, this is not your time. Is there anybody in the room who would like to speak on a consent agenda item? Yes, sir. Come on up to the microphone. Identify yourself, and you have 3 minutes. Over there.
My name is Khalil Reed from 208 Fairway Avenue. I was wondering if we do the gun buyback programs, I was wondering how we make sure it's safe and how the destruction happens. I'm just wondering how all that stuff happens.
Okay. Tell you what, let's take any other comments, and then we may be able to make answers to your question and other questions as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Good question. Is there anybody online who would like to speak to a consent agenda item?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
Is there anybody else in person who would like to speak to a consent agenda item? Okay, I see nothing, so we will close this part of the public comment. Let me just ask, is Chief Kotches, can you give us an answer on the question that was just asked?
Yes, Mayor. So basically what will happen is whoever runs the program, like I said, we would be reaching out to nonprofit to actually facilitate the gun buyback, where we would be involved in that process. Any firearms recovered, we would then take in, and they're incinerated.
Thank you.
So if there's no other comments, I forgot, I read this wonderful proclamation, but we had our Director of Parks and Rec here today to receive it. Is Mr. Anthony, are you still here? I apologize.
Yep.
Please, sir, come on up. Deputy Director. Did you want to say a few words?
That's dangerous. That's dangerous.
First and foremost, thank you so much for making proclamation to Parks and Recreation Month. I would like to say thanks to the staff. They have been working really, really hard, especially during the summer time. So kudos to all the staffs in Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Okay, so we have not voted on the consent agenda yet, so any further questions or comments from council? Okay, all in favor of adopting the, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further questions or comments? All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, passes 5-0. City Manager's report, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, sir. Good evening. I have a couple of items this evening, since it's my last meeting. The city continues to move briskly through its strategic planning process. Recently, members of staff leadership participated in a session to review the city council's identified goals in order to brainstorm adding strategies and measures to those strategic outcome areas. The city manager will review that draft framework in the next few weeks with the goal of a completed framework that will be presented to City Council and the public. The City of Charlottesville's Community Arts and Festival Grants Program is ready to launch. The program was created to respond to the lingering negative impacts of the pandemic on community events. The program is intended to promote citywide special events that will activate public spaces, enrich the lives of residents, encourage partnerships between organizations, foster a vibrant and diverse community, and stimulate economic activity. A total of $580,000 was reserved by the City Council on August 2022 for arts and festivals using American Rescue Plan Act funding. $560,000 will be used for this competitive grant process that will provide funding specifically for expenses associated with the cost of city services and events costs, such as permits and protective barriers. The application is open now for any event to be held between July 1, 23 and December 31, 23. More information on the application can be found on our website. The City of Charlottesville has been accepted to participate in the competitive National League of Cities Capstone Challenge program through an application submitted by Deputy City Manager Ashley Marshall. The Capstone Challenge program matches cities with strategic partners to work together on a project during an 8-month period. At the end of the period, each working group will share the outcomes of their project and will also produce a reference document for any city that will be shared through the National League of Cities. In this cohort, there are 7 projects that feature 7 strategic partners. 13 municipalities were selected from across the country. Charlottesville is the only city selected from the Commonwealth of Virginia. The City of Charlottesville lost my page. the city of Charlottesville will partner with a number of cities in Houston and Rochester, right. Okay. So next, the search for the fire chief is winding down. We received 30 applications from across the country. Very competitive process. The review committee, the in-house review committee, which included representatives from the firefighters union, narrowed the field to 8 who were invited for online interviews. After that interview, 4 candidates were invited for in-person interviews. The city manager is expected to appoint the fire chief in the next several weeks. The city manager attended the Fire Academy graduation service where 12 academy graduates were pinned. CFD has no vacancies with the 11 recruits that are now entering the academy. It is an amazing accomplishment given the market that we've been facing over the last year. The city attorney hiring has been completed with the hiring of the new city attorney, Jacob Stroman, and the hiring of April Wimberly and Ryan Franklin as assistant city attorneys. The office of the city attorney is now fully staffed, and we're glad of that. We want to thank the work of Sands Anderson, who served as our interim city attorney in the last several months and helped make sure we was covered during that period. Chief Kachas, through his concentrated efforts, has hired 15 recruits in the police academy. The success of CPD cuts the vacancies in the department from 30 to 15. That's a big feat as well. Charlottesville Police Department National Night Out. It's going to be August 1st at Ix Park. And we have a video that we want to share that was produced inside that I think you'll find interesting, that will give you all of the data you need on this event. David?
Hey Charlottesville, have you guys heard what's going to happen on August 1st from 5:30 to 8 o'clock here at the Ix Park? We're going to have National Night Out. That's right, National Night Out. It's going to be bigger and better than we've ever had it before. I know a lot of people like to make excuses for, reasons they can't go to things, but we got everything covered. You hungry? We got you covered. We're going to have plenty of food. The big highlight of it is going to be Mission Barbecue. We're going to have all kinds of food for you. You worried about the heat? We got you covered. Kona Ice will be here, baby. You don't have a car? Your vehicle's broke down? We got you covered. Go to any CAT bus station or bus stop. Get on for free. You need something for your kids to do? We're gonna have bounce houses, obstacle courses, dunk tanks, and a lot more. You're looking for a unique experience for your entire family? The Looking Glass will be open for free. It includes interactive art from local artists. So come out August 1st from 5:30 to 8 o'clock, Ix Park. Enjoy your neighbors and your local community partners.
Yes. Thank you, Chief Kachas, and our star, why don't you come in? Officer Thomas, thank you very much. Continuing with my report, the Human Resource Director, Marianne Hardy, has been meeting with department heads to identify where each employee fits on the proposed pay scale. There will be a final meeting with department heads and a virtual public hearing for city employees next week. The new pay plan is expected to be presented to council on August 7th for the first reading for approval at August 21st council meeting. On July, well, let me say that The Charlottesville Airport is losing its leader. Melinda Crawford, after 10 years, is retiring, and she's done a tremendous job. I attended the employee event in her honor, and we bid her farewell. We will miss her. The board will start the interview process for a new leader at its upcoming meeting. And also note that, we have new flights into show, both Bello with flights to Orlando, and we're getting Chicago and Philadelphia back. So that's coming. Okay. On July 27th, the lead team will complete a 12-week course of study conducted by Piedmont Virginia Community College. The program was designed to build a strong leadership team and enhance the skills of our team around issues that confront all of us and equip the team to better navigate challenges that we're faced with. At this point, before I make my last statement, I'd like to ask Chrissy Hamill to come and present the financial report for July. I'll just steal a little bit of her thunder and say that for the second year in a row, we are ending with a big surplus. And that surplus is driven by double-digit increase in assessments, and that's market activity, and also savings from vacancies that we have that we're still having a challenge with. But we did hire a recruitment staff person who's whittling the number down. Chrissy, you want to go through the?
Yes, sir. So thank you. As Mr. Rogers noted, and as we've been talking to you since about the second quarter, we are expecting a sizable surplus at the end of this year. Again, as a budget person, we like to come and talk to you about surpluses as opposed to deficits. However, we don't frequently like to talk about surpluses this big. So largely what we have continued to see is that with the pandemic and the revenues, this has been uncharted waters. We have tried to budget conservatively to make sure we were making our marks. We had no trends to follow during this time period. And not unlike many other localities across the state, we have found that we have several of our largest revenues that are very economically sensitive. And then as Mr. Rogers noted, the double-digit assessment increases that we've had for 2 years in a row are contributing to that. So on the revenue side, from a budget perspective, you'll see here that we are expecting about $12.8 million. We are very early in the year-end process. Finance has a lot of work to do, but I did go through last week, and just as a snapshot, our actuals are actually following very closely to these revised revenue figures that we have here, so we do feel pretty good about them. That said, there are notes that are coming out of the state where they are starting to see some downturns, especially with, not downturns, but slowdowns, especially with sales tax, which we typically have sort of lagged the state with our revenue trends. So, all this to say, to lag a little bit amongst historically high revenue levels, does that mean we're going to have a budget cut? Probably not. We're still doing very well, but not as well as we have been seeing over the last 2 years. So with that, you'll see here that this is largely driven by real estate, personal property, which we talked about with the historically high assessment values, sales tax, lodging tax, meals tax, and business and personal business and professional license, excuse me. So those are the things that are driving on the revenue side. As Mr. Rogers said, we are expecting about $7 million in vacancy savings, which is a large number. We've made a lot of steps forward, as we noted with the police department. However, we take 2 steps forward and a half a step back. So we are still working on that, but we know between those two items, what you see here and the vacancy savings, that's about 19 million. Per policy, all of that will go to the CIP contingency. That is one-time money that can be, that will come before council to be assigned to, as you like, for projects and other uses. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And the treasurer will come back in the first meeting in August with the cash flow report?
Yes, sir. He just hasn't gotten all of those reports to be able to report tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Chrissy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions? Okay. Well, Mayor Snook and councilors, this is my last meeting as your interim city manager. For the last 18 months, it has been my pleasure, my professional pleasure, representing the Robert Bobb Group to serve the city of Charlottesville. My assignment was to stabilize government operations, present the budget, fill a number of critical vacancies, and present to council programs and policies necessary for efficient working of government. I stated at the Chamber of Commerce State of the City program 3 weeks after I was here that my goal was to make government boring. Many wondered what I meant about that statement. Very simply, my objective was to assure an administration that was responsive to council and the community, and to make sure our employees had the tools they needed to perform as expected. With the hard work of our staff, I am well satisfied that we did that. I said to the lead team in our first meeting that my career objective always is to leave things better than I found them, and I believe that was achieved. I thank this council for demonstrating what good governance looks like. You have worked well together to resolve issues for the benefit of the community, as demonstrated by the fact that in 37 meetings that have been held where you took 263 votes, 245 of them were unanimous. That's 93.16%. That certainly means that you talked to each other. You worked things out. That doesn't mean that there was total agreement across the board, but you did the work of governance and worked it out and came back with a unanimous vote most of the time. That's a big difference. And you really, in my opinion, have what governance should look like from the council level, and I thank you for that. That has made this a pleasure. To the city staff and leadership team, thank you for your extraordinary support. To Sam and Ashley, you have been exemplary, at the top of the list for the number of deputies that have worked for me over my career. To Terry Bentley and Teresa Pollock, the anchors of the city manager's office, they held it down for us. And to the citizens of Charlottesville, especially those who stopped me along my way to share kind words about our work, thank you for your kindness, and thank you for making this point in my professional life outstanding and fabulous and personally fulfilling. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Rogers, I have to say, as the writer of proclamations and so on, we have a proclamation here as a resolution of appreciation for Michael C. Rogers. Whereas effective January 31, 2022, Michael C. Rogers began his service to the city of Charlottesville as interim city manager, and whereas in the 18 months since, Mr. Rogers has brought stability to the government of the city of Charlottesville, leading us through a constantly changing fiscal landscape and the end of the COVID pandemic. And whereas Mr. Rogers guided council through the preparation of 2 budgets in which Charlottesville developed a plan for funding the $90 million renovation of Buford Middle School, while also continuing to allocate at least $10 million annually for affordable housing efforts. And whereas under Mr. Rogers' leadership, many long-stalled initiatives have moved forward, including passage of the Climate Action Plan, the rewrite of the zoning code, the development of a collective bargaining ordinance, and a revision of the Police Civilian Oversight Board ordinance. And whereas under Mr. Rogers' leadership, the city has continued to rebuild its workforce after the many resignations over the last 5 years. And whereas Mr. Rogers brought patience, a calm demeanor, a willingness to mentor younger staff, and his vast experience to this very difficult job, now therefore we, the City Council of the City of Charlottesville, express our deep gratitude to Michael C. Rogers for his service as our interim city manager and wish him great success in his next endeavors. Signed and sealed the 17th day of July 2023 by all 5 members of City Council.
Thank you very much. I didn't know that was happening.
Can't know everything.
That's why it's a mayoral proclamation. Okay, so time for community matters. We have 1 pre-registered speaker, leaving 15 slots for additional speakers on community matters. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Our 1 pre-registered speaker is Marilyn Poling. Is she here or is she online or?
She will be joining by way of Zoom.
Okay.
Marilyn, you're on with council.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Marilyn Poling. I live at 123 Observatory Avenue. I'm speaking about the ERB review of 2005 JPA. I think that the porches along Observatory Avenue should be removed from the design. Porches will encourage illegal parking by delivery vehicles and by guests visiting the tenants with porches. This would block two-way traffic and get in the way of emergency vehicles. Removing porches from the design is changing the design. It is not managing traffic or managing parking violations or managing vehicle accessibility or restricting parking on city streets any more than making sure that 2005 JPA's external lighting doesn't shine directly into neighbors' houses is managing the city streetlights on Observatory or Washington Avenue. Porches were added to the design during design review. They are a design feature with dangerous consequences. Please remove them from the design.
Thank you, Ms. Poling.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak? Yes, sir. Go to the podium, please. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, hi, members of City Council and members of the City Manager Office. My name is Caetano de Campos Lopez, and today I'm here with the Community Climate Collaborative as their Director of Climate Policy, but also, why not, as a faculty lecturer at the UVA teaching sustainable transportation. And I would like to share a few thoughts about the alternative fuels study being conducted by CAT and the Transportation Department of the city. I already sent an email this afternoon with some remarks, so today, right now, I'll just make it more conversational. And for those that know me, and most of you do know me, you know that I try to be unbiased most of the time, and I try to give credit where it's due. So I will start with a positive note. The title of the study is really good, Alternative Fuel Study. Okay, let's move to the rest of my comments. So the study started about 2 years ago. It started in a situation where it was not informed to the community. It was being, the RFP was being released without much conversation in community events like this one, or even announced at all. And I think that that's a great part of the issue that we have seen with this study, because as an economist, there is no right answer for public policy in general. Public policy, the right way of doing it, in a way that meets the community needs and desires. So therefore, by not engaging with the community, you are just doing whatever you think is best. And that's not the right way of doing it, in my opinion, and that's not how this community would like to see. I would like to also share that this study is as good as the foundations of this study, the assumptions of this study, as any other study. This study relies on some information, for example, from a transportation route optimization study conducted about 3 years ago, when the city of Charlottesville had had not good information about ridership usage because of lack of adequate device to estimate ridership. Guess what? Pandemic started, and the study was scheduled for that moment, 2020, fiscal year 2021. It started in July 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Instead of stopping the study was conducted with only 6 devices during this pandemic months of second half of 2020, and yielded results that, not surprisingly, didn't change much at all. The routes remain mostly the same, and the conclusion is that the system was more or less operating as well as it was about 30 years ago. So the results of the studies we're going to be seeing today afterwards are based on conclusions like this one. Lastly, there is the so-called renewable natural gas technology being considered for this study, which, in my opinion, is just there to make natural gas looks better. So I ask why this study is not considering, for example, solid-state batteries that makes electric vehicles look much better, as they are twice as capable of the current batteries, and their life cycle is about 3 times to 5 times longer. So I'll keep in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Did you say solid state?
Solid state batteries. Solid state batteries.
All right, is there anyone online who would like to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, we have Robin Hoffman.
Ms. Hoffman, you're on. You got 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, I want to thank everybody, Mr. Rogers, and everybody who's been there, at council, and really stepped up to a lot of the needs of the city. And during the pandemic and up till now, I really do appreciate it. But I know a lot of you know that I started an art park for the farmers, the local farmers. Right now during the climate crisis, we need to step up and adapt and provide shelters for the farmers and the farmers market and the art park. And also because of the possible grant, somebody could actually direct an art park, have music there, etc. at Mead Park. It's been really successful. I've done caricatures, and the kids have been doing commissioned signage for the vendors and things like that. And people have been visiting, musicians and different artists. But the one thing I do know is that living in Willow Mills and near Mead Park and all that, the ridership and the buses, well, my heart was broken. I'm seeing people sitting without a canopy. So I looked up canopies, bus canopies, and how much they cost. And apparently Amazon sells bus canopies. And they sell them for like $2,000, as opposed to like some other companies were selling them for like $6,000. So I'm imploring you to, first of all, please make the Mead Park water park user-friendly. The grounds are not kept up well. I've written letters or emails to Parks and Rec. And secondly, please, Mayor Snook, a year ago, you said you were going to put canopies for the buses, and the kids are coming. They need better walkable sidewalks there and that sort of thing. If the Parks and Rec could do it for Washington Park, can they do it for East High? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Next to anybody here in person. So a hand in the back. I'll get you next hand.
Hi, good evening, City Council, City Manager. Congrats. Director of the Community Climate Collaborative. And today we are experiencing yet another day of poor air quality, in large part due to climate change. So as Council begins to consider alternative fuels, this is something to keep in mind as we're listening to information here tonight. We have a climate commitment we need to meet. We need to reach net zero by the year 2050, and Council needs to just really dig in and try to solve this problem with the community. And I wanted to point out that I was listening to the Office of Economics Development Strategic Plan presentation earlier tonight, and it was noted that one of the pieces of our economic viability is really the clean energy sector that we have in this community. We have some of the businesses at the forefront of solutions for climate change right here in this community. And we have businesses that are doing vehicle-to-grid energy transformation. We have clean energy companies. We have some really strategic thinkers right here in this community. So I encourage council, let's align our city and our infrastructure with our economic priorities for who we want to attract and the sectors we want to grow in this community, and really think about bringing these strategic minds to help solve our challenges, whether it's transit or city buildings or energy efficiency or more resilient schools. We have a lot of the tools right here in this community and a lot of great minds that we can bring together and really allow some of these companies that are here to work with us as the city and pilot some of their technologies right here. So just wanted to put those thoughts in your mind as we consider this information tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Do we have somebody online next?
Yes, Mayor Snook, we have Bruce Glasgow.
Mr. Glasgow, you're on, got 3 minutes. If you're talking to us, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Glasgow. I'm a PVCC professor. I live off Rio Road, and I'd also like to talk about electric buses. When it comes to climate change, there are really three groups of people. There's the group that believes in the scientific consensus that it's a threat to our planet, which will hurt our descendants for generations if we don't do something to stop it now. The second group doesn't believe it's real or doesn't believe there's anything we can do to stop it. If you're in that group, you're willing to ignore the vast majority of climate scientists, glaciers melting that have stood for thousands of years, and the extreme weather of the last decade. And the undeniable fact that this year has seen the highest temperatures ever recorded, not to mention the smoke from Canada. If you're capable of that level of denial, I won't be able to say anything in 3 minutes that will change your mind. Then there's a third group that probably is the majority. We know it's a problem, but it doesn't affect us right here, right now, so we put it on the back burner, literally. We announced publicly that we plan to do something farther down the line, the way this council did when it voted for a climate action plan to reduce emissions by 50% before 2030 and down to zero by 2050. That was great, but when it's time to make the tough calls, there are always other concerns that come to the forefront. We just don't want to leave our comfort zone. Talk is cheap, and so are promises, but actions are what counts, and when it comes to those, there isn't much difference between the second group of climate change deniers and the third group that just makes excuses. Since transportation is the largest contributor to global warming, you'll be hearing from many climate change advocates over the next weeks and months asking this council to adopt electric buses instead of continuing to depend on fossil fuels. But if you want to take the easy path, you will also hear plenty of recommendations from folks with a vested interest that will give you excuses to do just that. Fossil fuel advocates will tell you about upfront costs and charging times and all kinds of other easy reasons why fossil fuels are the way to go. It'll be simple for you to avoid asking tough questions about who stands to gain if you take that advice, or whether electric alternatives have truly been given a fair shake. Members of Charlottesville environmental groups have looked at the numbers ourselves, and we are convinced that federal grants can make electric buses comparable and maybe even superior in cost to alternatives. Estimates that we would need to replace diesel with electric buses at more than a 1-to-1 ratio are based on incorrect data. And the savings that come from the fact that electricity is cheaper than gas, both diesel and LNG, mean that they may end up being less expensive than fossil fuel powered buses in the long run. Doubtless, if you take our advice tonight, you'll want to conduct your own studies to find out if that research is correct. Still, voting for gas-powered buses will almost certainly be the easier choice. And that's how our planet has gotten into the mess we're in right now. So we, the citizens of Charlottesville and Albemarle, will be waiting to find out, are our electric officials part of the group that make the easy choice or the group that gives a damn about the future of this planet? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glasgow. Next, in person, Ann, I said. There is a time set for, I think it's 10 minutes for you all.
Okay, so, and that's in a couple of hours or something?
It's not going to be that long, but, yeah.
So, I mean, I think I might have like 4 minutes.
Okay. All right. Anybody else here in person? Okay, those folks are just leaving. Okay, anybody else online?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Okay, so we will close then the Community Matters portion. There will be an additional public comment section at the end of the meeting. The first action item on our agenda is the approval of the city manager employment agreement. One reading, and it's very simple. We have extended a contract to Sam Sanders to be our next city manager, and I think folks will likely have seen his information. He has been with us for about 2 years as the deputy city manager. Before that, he was the executive director of the Mid-City Redevelopment Alliance in Baton Rouge. He has a bachelor's degree from Christopher Newport University, proving he was originally a Virginia person. Then his travels took him elsewhere, and he wound up getting a master's in public administration from Troy State. He has been just a wonderful addition to our team for the last couple of years, and the city council was delighted to be able to offer him the job, and he even said yes. And so we're asking now for approval of the city manager employment agreement, which was provided in the materials. Is there a motion?
Would you like to make it?
I don't have mine. Okay. I would move. Do I need to scroll down some more for you? I would move to approve. Wait, hold it. You can make. Okay.
No. He wants to do it. Give him a break.
I don't particularly care.
No.
I would move for approval of the city manager employment agreement to appoint Sam Sanders as our next permanent city manager.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We all had some discussion on the matter last Wednesday. No second thoughts?
We've been discussing this for a while.
That's right. All right, so all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
No, none are opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations, Sam. And I want to point out that there will be an opportunity on Thursday, the 20th, to thank Mr. Rogers for his service here and to welcome Sam in his new role. It'll be at Carver from 5 to 8. 5 to 7? 5 to 7. And there'll be a little bit of speechifying at the beginning, but not very much. And after that, it's mainly a social opportunity. So if you don't know Sam, come by and meet him. If you would like to say something to Mr. Rogers, thanking him for his service here, that would also be appropriate. 5 to 7 Thursday night at Carver. So, second item.
Did you have any words?
Yeah, I would like to say something. I'm sorry.
Oh, he has words.
I have to practice. Got to get it done, right? So I just want to basically start by saying thank you to the members of council for your support. I'm definitely looking forward to the ability to bring forward your vision for this city. I want to thank the staff and many of our residents. This community has been very supportive over the past few days, as my email box, phone calls, messages, and all have just been a little overwhelming. And I do appreciate the various kind words and well wishes. That confidence from all of you makes it easier for me to step forward and slide into this seat. I just want to make a couple comments in regards to the way I look at this opportunity. Our role as public servants comes with an awesome responsibility. We should take that work seriously and set our expectations high. As I move into this new seat, I aspire to be clear, consistent, decisive, and inclusive. And while not every decision can be made by committee, I will strive to seek and embrace all facets of an issue and make sure that I consider them collectively. We have a lot on our plate. We've always talked about that. But I probably want to say make that a platter because it's really not a plate. It really isn't. There's still so much more being discussed and considered, so we know that expansion is a part of that ongoing conversation. And we as a team must work collegially, collaboratively, and cooperatively to achieve the many goals that have been set. I may be one who struggles to achieve work-life balance. People are reminding me of that. And I will always encourage others to seek and find theirs. So as I do that with them, I hope to bring that to myself. I will support this team in every way that I can. They are a very capable and experienced group of professionals. I expect so much from each of you, and our community needs you. Every person within the city organization, regardless of position, is contributing to the work of impacting people's lives. Let's keep that work in the forefront of our actions each day, and we will be better for it. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for your demonstration of city management where boring government gets things done. And thank you for taking an interest in my ability to serve on any level. I do appreciate that. So let's get to work, and thank you all. And we have a lot more to do and a lot more to talk about as things move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Comments?
Yeah, as informal as our resolution was tonight, I think for myself and all of us, one, it really does mean a lot that you were willing to step into this role, and it really just has been a joy being able to work with you and the team over the past several years, and your integrity and commitment to service leaves no doubt in my mind that we have a very bright future ahead of us, and that we're all ready to stand behind you 110%. And I will also say, because we didn't get a chance with the resolution, to thank you, Mr. Rogers, as well for your service as interim. I don't like to often think back to where we were a few years ago when we all started, but our local government was in a very rough space. And tonight in your employee newsletter, you said your biggest goal is to always leave a place better off after you've left than when you came. And there is zero question that that was accomplished here. And everyone likes to say local government was boring, and in a way it has been. But if you care about policy, it has not been boring at all. Our team, with you as the leader, have been able to accomplish collective bargaining, multiple budgets, school reconfiguration, our largest investment in affordable housing ever. And that work is always going to be a part of the legacy of the city. And I really appreciate everything you've been able to offer us, along with the team who is supporting you. So thank you.
Other comments?
I do have one.
As the newest member of the team, I guess I make the fifth person, so I'm on the basketball team now. All of the things that Mr. Rogers and Mr. Sanders have stated are true. The team and all of the people that work for the city of Charlottesville love their jobs. They work hard, and some of them probably are not paid what they're worth. But for someone who came in new, someone who had questions, and I'm a visual person. Whenever I emailed or picked up the phone, everyone greeted me and treated me with respect, and never once said, I don't have time or I can't help you. And I know some of the questions that I ask, they answer every day, more than once. And it says a lot to be a resident of a community where people that do the hard work are receptive to those of us that receive the services. So to the entire team, from Mr. Rogers down and back up, to Sam and Ashley and all around, to all of the people that you supervise, and all of the people that I've met that say hi and genuinely mean it. You've left the city better than you found it. You're getting a city that is better than when you came, and the only place for the city of Charlottesville is to go up. We're onward and upward, and thank you both.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Just logistics for Thursday's meet and greet. You can send questions if you have questions for Mr. Sanders or City Council. Send those to clerk@charlottesville.gov, and we'll compile those and provide those before the meeting, just so we have one central location for questions. I'll be accepting those.
else before we move on? All right, so now we come to the appeal of the Entrance Corridor Review Board. See, I told you it wouldn't be that long, Ann. Certificate of appropriateness for construction of an apartment building at 2005 Jefferson Park Avenue. Jeff Warner will summarize the request. Is Jeff with us, or is he online, or what? Ah, way in the back. So the procedure here is that Jeff will summarize the request and the ERB's decision for roughly 10 minutes. Then the appellants, plural, there are 5 of them. I don't know how you're going to apportion your time, have up to 10 minutes total to speak. And then the opportunity for the ERB chairperson to speak for up to 5 minutes. And that will be the comment.
If I just, before I start, I did want to say congrats to Sam and Mike. I really, I cannot thank you enough for leveling the ride for the last couple of years. I speak as staff, I speak as a 25-year resident of the city, and really grateful. And I've been coaching high school lacrosse for 35 years, so I've seen all kinds of teams. I've seen all kinds of coaches and all types of leadership, and I just really, the two of you, I just thank you. I don't want to get emotional, but thank you. We needed it. Thank you very much. And Mike, you know, good luck where you go next. Thank you. All right, so again, good evening. I'm Jeff Warner. I'm the city's preservation and design planner, and in that capacity, I serve as staff for the Entrance Corridor Review Board, the ERB, which is, in fact, the city's planning commission and the body that conducts the design review for new construction within the city's several entrance corridors. And I'm here tonight regarding the appeal of the ERB's July 13th, 2023 approval of the design review of the certificate of appropriateness for the proposed development of 3 parcels on JPA, collectively referred to as 2005 JPA. And this was a request to construct a multi-story brick and stucco apartment building. So briefly, that in December 2022, we received an application for the ERB design review. On February 14th, 2023, and again on March 14th, 2023, the ERB approved the COA with conditions. The March meeting was necessary due to an error with the public notice for the February meeting. Following the February and March meetings, the approved COA was appealed to City Council, and you all reviewed that on May 15th, 2023. Following your discussion, you did not make a decision on the appeal. However, to eliminate concern regarding the ERB meeting notice letters, you instructed staff to re-advertise the COA request for review by the ERB. And again, forgive all the abbreviations here, but that's how planners speak. On June 13th, 2023, the ERB again reviewed the COA request for 2005 JPA and approved it with conditions. Following the June ERB meeting, the approved COA was appealed to City Council. There were 5 appeal letters, and they are attached in attachment 1 of your staff memo. And as we did with the appeal in May, the staff prepared a collective response to those 5 letters. Some background, the project at 2005 JPA is within the Fontaine Avenue, Jefferson Park Avenue entrance corridor, therefore subject to design review. By the city requiring design review by an appointed board, in this case the ERB, state code requires that aggrieved parties are permitted to appeal the actions of those boards, to appeal to City Council the action of those boards. So tonight, in reviewing this appeal, your role, council's role, is to determine whether to approve or to deny that certificate of appropriateness. And according to city code, when you review an appeal of an ERB decision, your task is to review the COA request as if it's the first time it had come forward. You may consider any information or opinions relevant to the application, and including information provided by the ERB. This review process, this is the first time we've reviewed an ERB project, as an appeal, but it's the same process that the city's used, as best I can determine, at least since 2008, for almost 20 appeals of actions by the Board of Architectural Review. So this is a process we've used. The order for the presentation of the appeal is as follows. First, I'm allowed 10 minutes to present the matter. Clock's not running, but I'll try to time it out. Followed by the appellant, who's allowed 10 minutes to comment. Followed by the ERB chair. I think Lyle might be available online. He has 5 minutes to comment. And then it's all for you all to discuss the matter and make a decision. And during that time, you can ask me questions, ask the appellant questions. Also, the applicant, the design team for the project is here tonight. So if you have any questions about the design, they're available. So following that discussion, you all may approve the COA. If so, staff recommends the council include the conditions that were approved by the ERB, and these are enumerated in the draft resolution number 1, which is attachment 8 in the staff memo. You all may approve the COA, but amend or revise the conditions approved by this ERB. Again, using resolution 1 in attachment 8 of the staff memo. You all may deny the COA. If so, however, you should state the reasons in the resolution, state the reasons for that denial. Draft resolution number 2, which is attachment number 9 in the staff memo, covers that. And finally, you all may defer action. However, staff recommends that the matter be resolved by council and not referred back to the ERB. They have reviewed it 3 times, and I think have been rather conclusive on their view. I don't mean that to be smart, just the fact. But in the staff memo that you have, I've summarized the ERB's actions in February, March, and in June. I've included links to the applicant's submittal, to the ERB staff reports, to the videos of each of the 3 ERB meetings. Also in attachment 1 are the 5 letters of appeal, appealing the ERB's June 13th action. Attachment 2 is staff's response to the issues raised in the appeal letters. And additionally, it has the 2 draft resolutions for you all to consider. And I'll say, I know resolutions are we used to just simply do a motion, but the resolution, I think, is something that legal can explain, but they are a bit wordy. In responding to the letters of appeal, as I did in May, tried to break them down into the categories of try to paraphrase what the appellants were offering, and I had to paraphrase and for clarity and brevity, but their complete letters are in the staff memo, so if there's any question about what was said, we can refer to those. And I think, again, in the time allowed, and I'll wrap up here, not enough time to present a detailed review, but this is how we do things also with the BAR and the ERB, an introduction of the project. The applicant presents and describes their project, and there's then the discussion between the applicant and either the BAR or the ERB. Hopefully my comments in response to the appellant's claims are clear. If you have any questions, we can certainly discuss them. And again, as I said, if necessary, the design team for the applicant is here tonight if there are any questions specific to the design. So in lieu of a summary of the appellant's comments, do you all have any questions for me that I can answer? Or
any questions for Mr. Orr?
Just one question. Obviously, the one public comment we heard earlier was specifically about the porches. What was it in the ERB's review and process that kind of led to that incorporation? Was it anything specific, or is it just a incidental design decision?
You apartment buildings, you can't necessarily tell someone where they're going to enter or exit. I think there a design rationale for that. But I think you also try to break up the streetscape by having entrances, not just a long blank wall. And granted, doors aren't necessarily the answer, but it's to have that, establish that streetscape. Where people go in and go out, where a delivery person may park to deliver something, and I think there was some criticism of the ERB and the comments earlier, but that's not within the ERB's purview. And that's not to say it's not their fault or our fault. It's simply to say the ERB has no purview over how or where people park or how or where they enter an apartment building.
Well, and
that helps.
I know before this came in, the largest criticism was that the original design was a completely undifferentiated massive wall. It was, I think, all the same material and color that was broken up with different materials, including that. So, I mean, maybe it's just kind of a trade-off thing.
Correct. And it's, the design guidelines are not a yes, no. It's not a dichotomous key that you can click down and reach the answer. And so it's an evaluation, but using the different materials, using the sort of, the wall is articulated, stepping in and out, that is intended to mitigate that sense of design and scale. But the height of the building has been the biggest problem, but that was established by a special use permit. So that was not the BAR, I'm sorry, I talked to the ERB, could not change that. That was established by what you all approved in the special use permit.
Other questions for Mr. Werner? All right, so next would be an opportunity for the appellants to speak, up to 10 minutes total. You're the only one here? Okay.
My name is Ann Benham. I live on Observatory Avenue, right across the street from where the rear part of this project is supposed to go. I have 4 comments to share. 3 directly relate to the ERB. The first thing is, the third item under the suggested motion staff recommendation begins, all exterior lighting and interior lighting visible at the garage entrance will have lamping that is dimmable. It goes on to say, the owner will address any reasonable public complaints about light glare, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd like to request to be told what is considered reasonable, a reasonable public complaint, and what recourse would be available in case a resident and the owner disagree about what a reasonable complaint is. So that's the first thing. Second, regarding the plants and the porches, in the context of the following excerpt from the architect's December 2022 plan. An array of plantings will liven the perimeter and improve the environment. On Observatory Avenue, open space is punctuated by neighborhood-scaled porches where tenants can see and be seen. I request that the porches be eliminated, even though it will contribute to a monolithic appearance. But this is for safety reasons. For one, the porches will invite parking by guests of the residents and more traffic from the guests as well as UPS and other service vehicles. This poses potential safety issues on narrow, dead-end Observatory where large emergency vehicles are already unable to drive down the street if there are cars parked on both sides. Eliminate the porches entirely and use the space for more tree plantings. For example, like the very fast-growing honey locust, which comes in a thornless version. Better to focus on tree plantings rather than an array of different-sized plants because shrubs and flowers cannot provide the shade and cooling benefits that trees do, or the CO2 take-up, or for at least 10 years while the replacement trees grow, can the heat island effect be, that will inevitably be increased with the destruction of the existing trees and the huge increase in impervious surface? Will that be mitigated for at least 10 years? The third comment I have has to do with the rear multi-use pathway. I think there's, I and some others would like that to be ADA compliant because it's a shortcut for observatory folks to take through to Washington and UVA on a more quiet route than having to go out to busy JPA. So that's the third thing. Lastly, fourthly, it would be very good if the city began to reward developers who build climate resilient projects with high albedo rated materials and who integrate mature trees that exist already on building sites, as much as the city now rewards those who put $1 million into an affordable housing fund. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Bannon. So next we have an opportunity for the ERB chairperson. It'd be Lyle Sola Yates. Is Mr. Sola Yates online or what?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Greetings, Lyle Sola Yates, Chair of the Entrance Quarter Review Board for Charlottesville. I'm a design cop. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but I try to be. And I try to prevent bad design. I can't force good design, which is often frustrating. I understand the frustration. We had the good fortune to review this project at 3 points, as well as additional communication with nearby residents. The designers had a work session with the team on this, and we saw significant evolution, and I believe significant improvement. Like many designers, there was interest in emphasizing verticality, which I love verticality too. Everyone loves verticality, but it makes it look taller. And we saw evolution of the design to be less vertical and more horizontal. It is still the same height, but it feels more human scale, which I believe is a public benefit. Yes, there are porches. My understanding based on the design guidelines is that they are an important amenity. And I would be sorry to see them go, but council, this is your baby. If you hate the porches, that is understandable. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm available for questions.
So the question I guess that I have is, and I think we always have to distinguish between what the Planning Commission does as a planning commission and what the Planning Commission does when you all are wearing your ERB hats, which technically are not the same hats. And there are things that you can do as the Planning Commission that you cannot do as the Entrance Review Board. And I'm wondering, out of the various things that have been mentioned this evening and in the other objections that have been made, I mean, it sort of feels to me like most of those are either site plan issues or they're just not, they're not ERB issues. And I wonder whether Mr. Warner is now at the podium here between you and Mr. Sola Yates. Can you give us some guidance on what's an ERB issue here?
Well, I just got up to, so I wasn't going back and forth and interrupting, but.
Lyle, if you could give us some guidance, I'd appreciate it. I mean, I've looked at the statute, but it feels to me like most of the concerns that are being raised at this point are essentially site plan issues rather than ERB issues. Do you agree with that?
This is my understanding. As the ERB, our concerns are aesthetic. It can be a little bit challenging switching gears. I believe the aesthetics here are pretty strong. We've got some mature trees, we've got some color, we've got some material variation. I believe aesthetically this is an improvement and is a benefit to the corridor. The ADA issue, I believe we discussed as a commission. My understanding was that there was an engineering issue there. That's my recollection on that issue. That is not an aesthetic issue. That is, I believe, a good concern about accessibility. The transportation planning concerns, yes, that is certainly a planning commission issue and one we discussed at length. I don't think we solved all the problems on the commission, but these issues will continue to be looked at by staff and will continue to be worked on.
And also you've got, again, special use permit conditions, there's a provision in there about a parking plan. So, you know, that was understood and anticipated when the SUP was reviewed. So there are certain things that were established, the ERB had to work with. They couldn't change unless the SUP was changed. And yes, there's site plan review for the lighting, the trees, that path in the back will go through the ADA coordinator. And I think I had commented that the ADA coordinator may determine that that is not the best accessible path. They may determine that it's out on JPA, but those are reviewed at the site plan, yes.
And the corollary to that is that when we are hearing an appeal of the ERB, we should not be making site plan decisions.
No, and typically, yeah, I mean, there were things raised during the reviews that are incorporated into the recommended conditions. So we you know, did give consideration to screening of things, to the lighting and lamping of particularly LED lighting, which has been an issue. So there were conditions put in there that the ERB felt addressed the concerns they had set, you know, raised. But I'll say again that the overarching concern is, we've heard, is the height of this project, but that was established by SUP. So the options to the ERB were determined. Do the materials, do the articulation of the surfaces, does that design mitigate the impact of that overall height?
So,
and they believe they did. So yeah.
So in our packet there is a suggested motion. I think this is the suggested motion we're looking at.
Page 304.
Well, what I'm looking at is actually on page 229, but
Attachment 8 is the actual resolution draft.
It should be attachment 8 and resolution 1.
What page is that on the new version?
304.
304.
Okay.
And that has, and this is, I appreciate this because other times we've not had all this sort of compiled in the same.
There we go, yeah.
The conditions, and so I appreciate that this is all neat and tidy. We're not having.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because it's
Yeah.
a lot. So I appreciate
But the motion suggested, I take it that these are the conditions that the ERB placed. And the first, talking about the glass shall be clear, new railings will match the metal rail, exterior lighting and interior lighting visible from the garage should be dimmable, have a color temperature not exceeding 3000 K. I don't even know what a color rendering index is. I know what the 3000 K is. What's a color rendering?
Color rendering index is the color with which you perceive an object. Natural sunlight has a color rendering index of 100. So, you know, we're trying to get it 80 or higher, preferably 90. So what you're seeing in a color when in an illuminated space is very close to what it would be in natural sunlight. And then the color temperature is a function of glare and brightness. What's happened is LED technology has gone way ahead of our code, which was written for the incandescent light bulb. And so that's why you'll hear us talking about lamping and some other terminology, and you'll be learning more as you go forward with the zoning rewrite. But does that help?
And to touch a little bit on the color temperature issue, I know from research I was doing on something else that And when you get a color temperature exceeds like 6,000 K, 6,000 Kelvin, that's a very blue light. And there have actually been studies that found neurological changes in people who are exposed in a long-term way to light at that level. But that at 3,000, there is basically no such neurological effect.
It's getting there, and this is a lengthy discussion the BAR had about lighting, and a lot of input from Mark Schuyler in the community, a lighting expert or lamping expert. And sometimes when you're on the road and there's a car coming at you that's got that really just harsh blue headlight, yeah, that's that higher color temperature. What we're hearing now is they're even suggesting we take it down lower, but the 3,000 K is sort of where the BAR got comfortable, and then that dimmability, and most of the lighting can be dimmed. So those three things seems to be covering the bases, at least on what's been approved in the last couple of years. So that's why we're there.
And I guess the question that I wanted to get to with that is, those all also feel to me like they would be site plan issues, and I'm wondering why those were selected to be included as conditions when it seems maybe they wouldn't have to be.
Not every site plan comes to me. A lot of things that happen in this, unless something's in a design review, to the BAR or the ERB, I don't see it. So the planners then look to the code. These conditions for lamping take it a step further. There are conditions that then I can look at in the site plan, but in a normal review of a site plan, it wouldn't come up. So it just gives me an extra thing, an extra box to check when I review it, because what'll happen is I look at the site plan. I also look at the building permit drawings when they come in for a project. And I'll go down through the light fixtures and say, have they addressed what were the conditions that we put on for the lamping, or conditions we put on about the glass, the clarity of glass has a surprising amount of range to it. So these are things that allow me as design staff, conditions placed by the ERB or the BAR, to then enforce when I review the drawings.
Let me shut up for a minute and let some other folks talk.
Yeah, I mean, the one note I would say at the bottom, the conditions of approval of those were approved by the ERB on February 14th, March 14th, and June 13th. So I was there at least 2 of those times, I think, and all of these conditions were put forward as a way to try to address concerns that were raised by the residents. And so my view is that we should go ahead and move this. I'm prepared to make a motion, and perhaps we could go ahead and vote on this tonight.
Make a motion, and we can continue to discuss after the motion's been made. That's
Okay.
fine.
I would move the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for the development of 2005 JPA, subject to the conditions that are laid out here in attachment 8, the draft resolution.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion, or continued discussion on the issue more broadly?
I would, go ahead, no, you go first. I mean, basically repeating what's already been said, I would just say I think the fundamental issue that I think people are concerned about is the height. And, it's at a height where any design decision it's gonna be the height it is, and that's the height it is. I think that the work that the ERB did actually made this, compared to the first design, look substantially better on a number of different levels, and shows that there is some value to a process like that, particularly with larger buildings, or at least having some kind of form-based code that's looking at these things in that level of detail. But either way, I think the relevant issue in people's concerns is the SUP, not the ERB's work, which I think it made it better. So I would be prepared to support it as well.
Any other discussion?
The young lady discussed the ADA compliant pathway and removal of porches in lieu of trees. What has been done about that? Because if you're going to have a pathway and it's not ADA compliant, can you have a pathway that's not ADA compliant?
That's part of the site plan review that will have to be.
You're nodding your head, we can?
That's right. So and I'm not the ADA coordinator, but the site plan is reviewed, and there must be an ADA compliant path, as it was explained to me. It may not be this one, it may be the sidewalk in front. That's a determination made by that staff person on all site plans. The bike runnels were included as a recommendation of one of the planning commissioners, or the ERB commissioners, and included in that. But yeah, so I mean,
I have a question on the floor.
So I say, if it is reviewed, that's not my call on the ADA compliance. That's that staff individual who reviews that. If you all feel strongly, the option is yours to incorporate a condition that addresses it. So I didn't want to take anything off the table, but I don't review it for ADA compliance.
But the point is that as this thing is designed, as part of the design process, there will be a path somewhere that is ADA accessible.
Correct.
That is going to happen. Now, the question about the porches is the first time I think I've heard about that. But whatever the issue is with the porches, I would have thought that would have been resolved before the ERB or the SUP 6 months ago. My frustration is this is the third time we're seeing this. I'm not really sure anything is changing. We've had a process. I'm not frustrated with you. It's just this.
My question was for clarity, and I understand it's been here 3 times, but I wanted to make sure that I was clear about what I was hearing. So continue.
Well, I don't, tonight I think is the first time I've heard anything about porches, and they're not noted here, and essentially this is a repeat of what we saw a month ago, which was only because of a advertising issue. And so at some point, it's not fair to the applicant to continue to have a discussion about these things. I mean, we have a process. I think it's time to vote on this one way or the other.
I'll call the question.
Any further discussion among councilors? All right, motion to, what's the resolution to approve the,
Attachment 8, how about that?
to deny the appeal and to approve the
COA.
certificate of appropriateness with the conditions on, what, page 308, was it?
Correct.
304.
304, okay.
304.
All right. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. So,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you all so much.
Next item, resolution approving a lease agreement with Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless for a portion of 105th Street Northeast City Space. Brenda Kelly.
Good evening. For the record, Brenda Kelly with the Office of Community Solutions. This item in front of you, as you just mentioned, Mayor, is a request to approve a lease agreement with the Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless, otherwise known as BROC, for the lease of a portion of city space where you're at right now. The format you have in front of you is a format that was approved by a city council to be used for commercial spaces in the garage. So that's a template basically that was put in place. This is a lease for the use of approximately 366 square feet just to the right of the entrance up front. It's basically a minimally secure area, which you're all familiar with. The space will serve as office space for a maximum of 3 employees of BROC. Some furniture will be provided by the city. The lease is for 2 years with an option to renew for one time for 1 year. The proposed lease rate is $1 per year with no annual increase. Brock will have access to the use of the 2 conference room spaces through city staff reserving the space on their behalf. And Brock will be responsible for janitorial services and all telecommunication services. We have Misty Graves here tonight from Human Services. If you have any questions about the city's relationship with Brock and how this lease came about to be. And I thought we had someone here from Brock, but I don't think I see them. So Misty and I are happy to answer any questions you have. Anthony Harrow did review the lease and had no issues with it.
Council, any questions?
Ms. Kelly, it's good to see you as always. I'm assuming this lease fits the Brenda Kelly program.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
It did go through the process we're trying to develop.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the end result is that they get to use the space for $1 a year.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic.
Just out of curiosity, does anybody else share this co-working space with them, or would it just be just them in that area?
It's city staff right now, so if you'll see in the lease document in front of you, there's no start date to that because Office of Community Solutions has 5 spaces right now. The ADA coordinator is here and 2 of our emergency management folks. So when Office of Community Solutions staff moves out of our offices, the emergency management staff will move into our offices, and then Brock will be able to move into the lease space up front. So they will be alone in that front space when they occupy that space.
Okay.
I appreciate the city working with them to make this happen. Yeah.
We're happy to.
I would move. This is one reading, correct? So we need.
Yes.
I would move to approve a lease agreement with Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless for a portion of 105th Street Northeast.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, next, also Ms. Kelly, Friendship Court redevelopment support.
So 2 items before I get to the actual item in front of you. This may be the last time you hear us referring this as Friendship Court. I'm sure you're all aware it has been renamed to Kindlewood. So hopefully we'll remember from now on to put items in front of you having to do with this as Kindlewood. We are in the process of working on a funding type agreement for the Phase 2 terms and conditions of allocating funding for this project. That will be in front of you in the future, and at that point, Piedmont Housing Alliance will be in front of you with an update on Phase 2 and the status of that piece of the project in much more detail. But the item in front of you tonight, and I hope I don't make this more confusing than it is typically on a consent agenda. So we have come in front of you before for Phase 1, basically just a resolution showing the city's financial support of the project, and Piedmont Housing Alliance uses that resolution to go with their funding applications for LIHTC applications or whatever they need it for state or federal funding or other funding sources. So in February 2021, we had a resolution from the City Council for the Phase 2 funding commitment support. And through that resolution, you all approved $3,250,000. And we word these resolutions as up to that amount because that's typically what's been approved in the CIP. So when we did this in February of 2021, that was proposed in the CIP budget, but ultimately the City Council approved a budget for $2,750,000. So if any of you were doing the math in this with what we've since added with additional CIP approvals, you would have seen those numbers off. But with this resolution, we're asking for your support for, I can't remember what that number was. Yes, up to that amount, which is the amount that has been approved in total through CIP budgets for Phase 2 of Friendship Court. This may also come in front of you in the future again because it's proposed for out years for additional funding for the Phase 2, but at this point, that's all the city can recommend, that we provide this resolution for Piedmont Housing Alliance. So we're asking for your approval of this resolution, and hopefully I didn't make that too confusing.
So this lets them access LIHTC credits and other.
This shows who they're making application to, that the city is also making financial donations or support to the project.
We're behind it.
Yes.
So we have, there's two resolutions in our packet, or both?
One was the one you approved in
Okay.
February 2021, and the one is we're asking you to approve.
He got it, he got it. I'm prepared to support it, but I will say when they come back for Phase 2, for something I will be looking for in an agreement, there's some type of assurity that the new units will, that city residents get a preference in them, because we're building a lot. We have a big hand in building affordable housing, and we just want to make sure that our residents get first dibs at it. So
Okay.
I'll be looking for that.
Okay, thank you.
Should your resolution say Kindlewood, since you've now changed the name, versus Friendship Court?
It's up to you.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I think-
The overall application is in as Friendship Court.
Yeah, so what should it be, Mr.
I-
Attorney?
Well, it would be the normal course to have it approved in the current name unless this is a companion item to the earlier, and it would cause some confusion with respect to the application process, so it's consistency.
I'm good with that, yes.
So it's correct, but I think for consistency purposes, since this is a
Companion,
follow-up to
yeah,
the
it should be
original item,
Friendship, okay.
to use this originally with it corrected in
Okay.
due course as we move down the road.
Right.
Okay.
We just don't want the applicant saying no, because it's not the same property, you know what I mean?
We'll leave it to
So
the
we
lawyers.
can move the current resolution
Yep.
as it's worded?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Okay, I would move the resolution in the packet, financial resolution supporting Friendship Court Phase 2, parcel number 280112000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, VDOT grant funds for Washington Park to Madison Avenue Trail.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council,
He
staff.
comes with a map.
Yeah.
I will in just one second. I'm here before you, I'm Chris Genzik, City Parks and Trails Planner. In that function, I get a lot of VDOT grants to implement some of these projects we do for trails and sidewalks and things. This particular project is to construct a ADA and bike wheelchair stroller type ramp. This is Lower Washington Park, Preston Avenue, Madison going west towards Grady and Venable School, Madison going east towards Rose Hill Drive, Burley School and all that. Currently, there is a staircase leading down from the upper Madison into the park that's not accessible to everybody. We got a grant from VDOT 3 years ago or so and designed the thing, put it to bid earlier this spring, and the prices came back double what we had in the budget. So coincidentally, Traffic Engineering and Neighborhood Development Services have another project using this funding line that they're not able to go forward with at this time. So they offered to transfer the money to this project so we can get this one done now. VDOT agreed, so this is a 2-reading appropriation to move the money from the canceled project, or the project that's no longer in this grant line. I think we're gonna do it later with a different funding, over to the Washington Ramp project, so we can get this thing built, hopefully by the end of the year, and so when the kids start going to school and the park opens again in the spring, everybody will be able to get up and down that hill equally. And this is a move to the next meeting to consent as a second reading if you move forward tonight.
Any clarifying questions?
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yep, it is.
Shall we carry it to the consent agenda next meeting?
Yes, you should.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Done.
Thank you.
Next, approve a special use permit at 218 West Market Street. Is somebody from NDS? Ms. Creasy, are you with us? I'm sorry?
She's getting ready to come
Okay.
on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your patience there as I was being promoted, and I apologize for not being in person. It's been a very complicated day. We have things taken care of, and that's the most important thing. So I am covering this item for both James and Miss Rainey, who are out of town. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this. Many of our counselors were at the hearing and so are aware of this. And we have our applicant, Ms. Valerie Long, present this evening. She's going to have a brief presentation that has been shared with our communication staff. So they'll be able to pull that up when she comes up to the microphone. But just wanted to give you an overview. This is a property at 218 West Market Street. It's an existing special use permit that was approved in 2019. And the applicant, as they got into their design process, determined that they needed some modifications to the step backs in order to make the units into habitable shapes. And they have asked for modification on the step backs to 25 and to 5 in various spots, and you'll be able to see that as part of the presentation. The Planning Commission considered this application on July 13th. There was discussion pertaining to the building form, including the reduced step backs and building modulation. And it was noted by the Planning Commission to recommend making these changes. You'll note in your resolution that there are multitudes of conditions. Many of these conditions are ones carried forward from the 2019 approval. So those are all still in place. The changes are specific to the step back requests that were made. And that is a basic overview of that, and I am available to assist with questions. And as noted, Ms. Long is there in the audience and ready to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Ms. Creasy.
Could I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So the resolution that we have here includes the language for modifying the step back. The conditions that are listed at the bottom are the ones, Ms. Creasy, that are carried forward from the past.
Correct.
Okay.
So in doing this, this means that we're not looking at multiple resolutions as to what was approved for the site. This is a resolution that contains all of the conditions and these two requested changes.
Other questions for Ms. Creasy? Ms. Long, on behalf of the applicant? And you have up to 10 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Valerie Long with Williams Mullen, representing the applicant. Our Jeff Levine with Heirloom Development is also participating remotely, as is Jeff Dreyfus with Bushman Dreyfus Architects, the project architects. I think Ms. Creasy covered the issues fairly well, but I'll just sum up, and I do have some slides. They're essentially the same slides that we showed at the joint public hearing in June, which I know not all of you were able to attend. The project was approved already as a special use permit for additional building height and density. The existing step back regulations for this particular zoning district are particularly large and frankly onerous. So our request is to reduce the step backs on 2 side streets from 25 feet. Along Market Street, we're requesting to reduce it from 25 feet to 10 feet, and then on Old Preston Avenue from 25 feet to 5 feet. That's the basic request.
And that's why she mentioned two pieces. It's those two that you just mentioned.
Correct. That, and to further clarify your question, Councilor Pinkston, all of the same conditions of approval from the original approval are in place. With those 2 changes, and then with one new condition that the Planning Commission recommended that requires pedestrian access or pedestrian connection between West Market and Old Preston during business hours. That was a suggestion that the BAR had made early on in the review process. It wasn't something that was originally a condition of approval with the original special use permit, but the Planning Commission recommended at the recent joint public hearing that that be added, and the applicant is agreeable to that. So that's a new condition that is added. Otherwise, the conditions are the same. Next slide. I think you all are generally familiar with this property. It's commonly referred to as the Artful Lodger site because of the furniture retail site. As you can see on the left side, the property fronts on both West Market Street as well as Old Preston Avenue, kind of right where Old Preston intersects with the downtown mall near the Omni. Next slide. Some visuals showing the existing 25-foot step back that applies on both street frontages and the request to reduce them from 25 feet to 10 feet along West Market, and then from 25 feet to 5 feet along Old Preston. That's the request. Next slide. And just some other visuals to show. The top left is what the building would essentially, the massing requirements would be under the existing step back requirements. As you can see, they're very large on both of the street frontages. And the lower left image is to reflect what the requested modifications to those step backs would result in. And the primary reason for this, aside from the fact that it would look much better for the building, it provides a much more functional interior layout, provides double frontage, double loaded corridors of multi-unit apartments, also allows for some addition of light and air space into the building, which will make it a much better quality design for everyone. Next slide. Just some other graphic images to try and demonstrate visually the request there and the vantage point. That is obviously from West Market Street. Next slide. And then likewise from the opposite direction, looking in the opposite direction up West Market Street. Next slide. And then finally from the downtown mall, a building would be visible generally from that location. And you can see the modest difference that it would make in terms of visibility there. Next slide. And this is a lot of detail, but just demonstrating that none of the other existing mixed-use zoning districts have such a large step-back requirement. The only exception is in the South Street district. There's a very short, I think a one block zoning district that has larger step-backs to reflect the unique character of some old historic homes on that street. But otherwise, step-backs are either in the 10-foot range or not at all. So, and we also note that the draft zoning ordinance for this district, it's proposed, or this property is proposed to be in the DX district, which does not have any step-backs at all. Next slide. I think that's everything. Yeah. Again, Mr. Levine and Mr. Dreyfus are on the Zoom. If anyone has any particular questions, we're happy to address those. But otherwise, we would request your support for the requested amendment.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the downtown is changing.
Mhm.
But as I recall, there was a comment by Lighthouse Theater,
Mhm.
and I don't know if the pedestrian access that you're adding on is a condition to address that. I can't remember the details, but I know that she was concerned about this time of year, mainly the summer camp students.
You're right, thank you. They expressed some concerns about the impacts of the construction process on the safety and the just continuity of their operations. And be happy to let Mr. Levine add some additional detail, but I know he did meet with the representative of the Lighthouse Studio to learn more about her concerns and try to help her understand how they can work together to ensure both the safety of their students and program participants and obviously the consistency of their operations. I'll ask Mr. Levine to elaborate. I was not in that meeting.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks for taking our application. Yes, I met with actually both neighbors who spoke at the last hearing. Ms. Conover at the building directly next to us on Preston, as well as Ms. Gould from Lighthouse. And correct, the pedestrian access was one of her concerns, and I believe that addresses that because a lot of the students and visitors do make a connection between, I'll say, the end of the downtown mall and West Market. So I believe that this does address that. And then as far as her other practical considerations, I gave her my cell phone and said we just need to constantly communicate and collaborate, and construction does get a little noisy and it does get a little dusty, but being good neighbors is paramount, and so we'll have to figure a way to keep her classes going. And so the dialogue's ongoing, and I feel we've listened and addressed her concerns.
Thank you. I'm prepared to.
A couple questions. I believe when this was originally approved, the plan was for 134 units. Just out of curiosity, one, where is that at now? And then two, does this SUP related to step backs change the number of units in any way?
It does not. It's not proposing to change the density or number of units at all. The only change requested is for the reduction in the step backs. So doesn't mean that they would necessarily build the full permitted units, but we're not
For sure.
requesting any change.
Well, and I know it's subject to change, but at the time, the plan was for 134 units. Just out of curiosity, has that gone down? Like, what is that number at currently?
I'm going to have to ask to
I could-
defer to Mr. Levine, who will be able to address that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're early in design, but one of the things we discovered in evaluating the step backs and, putting real pen to paper is it's very difficult to get good layouts, let alone get the density that's proposed. So with the step back, we'll be able to go back in, and I believe we'll be able to get to probably 134 units as proposed.
Thank you. And not a question. I know this is only 1 or 2 readings, but I'll just say I'm not inclined to support it simply because at 134 units, the affordable housing units proffered do not match our draft inclusionary zoning ordinance, and there was a reference to the justification for approving it being the upcoming change to our zoning. And given that, I'm not inclined to support it, given that they're not also matching the inclusionary zoning program. If they were, I would likely be inclined to support it, but.
Question, wasn't this, I'm sorry, I'm just confused. So wasn't there a special use permit already granted and we're modifying that now? Wasn't that done? prior
Correct.
to
There
the
was a special
code?
use permit approved in 2020. And they are requesting special use permit now, in part using the future zoning draft as a justification for us approving that SUP. So again.
Approving what SUP? The modified one today with the new step backs?
Correct.
That's not true.
It was in your presentation as one of your justifications was that the news designation for this district would have no step backs. It was not the only justification, but it was a justification.
Is that true, Mr. Levine?
It was just an example that the city's already considering step back requirements and amending them. But I don't think it could be taken altogether because the new zoning has an entirely different inclusionary zoning with bonus height. So to compare the affordable housing units that I proffered, which are actually in excess of what's required under the current zoning ordinance because they're deeper discounted AMIs than what's currently proposed, as well as meeting more units, as well as community space, and something that we went through in our initial SUP. All of it's actually better than the current process. What's being considered by the city now would be to have additional affordable housing as a trade-off for additional density. But as Ms. Long just stated, which is true, we're not asking for any more density, any more units. We're simply just asking to make these layouts better in this unique site, which is sort of an anomaly in the city, is the only one of having 25-foot step backs. And yes, the point was just being made that it happens to be consistent with the future analysis by the city of what step backs would be required. But it's not really the justification of it.
Well, except that you're going to be having more square feet. And since you typically price apartments and condos and so on by square feet, I assume you're going to get additional profit out of this.
That's not necessarily true because once you get over a certain size of unit, you really don't get a return on that size. There are certain sizes that work. That's also why a lot of deep units don't get additional dollars per square foot. They just get additional size, but you can't get money out of it.
So you would be incurring additional cost to build additional build additional square feet, where the additional square feet don't come for free, and you don't think you're going to get any money out of it? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's a good point, Mayor, but what's interesting is the current step backs actually require us to build something that's not marketable. So the additional square footage isn't necessarily getting us more profit, as you say. It's allowing us to build a unit that's marketable that we can rent on the open market. So because if you don't have the right depths and you don't have the right corridors, you can't really market it. So to just say that a 800 square foot unit is more profitable than a 520 square foot unit, if the 520 square foot unit isn't leasable, what we're here today is to get units that are marketable. It's not a dollar for dollar.
So how many additional square feet are you getting if we grant this?
Say that again?
How many additional square feet are you getting if we grant this?
Jeff Dreyfus might know that it's actually not that much different because it allows us to carve out the building and have light wells. So I'm not sure Jeff, do you know the exact difference in square footage?
I don't know the exact square footage difference, but as Jeff points out in the examples that Ms. Long showed, the footprint will be able to be modulated very differently. And it's also one of the things that will allow us to provide light and air throughout the building, as opposed to one large block. So in the end, I don't know what the complete building envelope, if built out as the revised step backs would allow, I don't know what that difference is, but we certainly wouldn't be taking advantage of that, the full square footage, because the units themselves, again, as Jeff says, would be unmarketable without light and air, especially on the east and west sides.
If it would be helpful, Mr. Mayor, I could ask Mr. Delahunt to put up one of the slides that I showed earlier that might clarify this point. I didn't quite follow it the first time they explained it to me. It was towards the end. It was the one that had sort of 4 different images when I was showing the top left and bottom left. I'm not sure what page that was.
I mean, just doing simple math, it appears that you're getting 35 additional feet of width, the one dimension, times however long the building is, times however many floors are above that point.
That's the page, thank you. So in the top right corner, that is the step backs that exist today. Again, 25 feet on the, I'll say the left and right side, which is the left is the West Market and the right is Old Preston. As you can see, there's no sort of cutout for light and air like there is in the bottom right image where you see the light gray, I don't have a pointer, but sort of a notch in the top middle that would allow light and air, and obviously have windows for those sides of the buildings. So that square footage in this example would be removed from the building in favor of light and air. So it's probably a net loss of square footage if it were designed this way, if that makes sense.
So you're saying that with the proposed in the lower right, you're not gonna get any more units. You're gonna just have light and air with the additional square feet that you are getting because of the request that you're making for the change in step backs. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a good way to summarize it, yes, that it's a shifting of this, a reduction in the step backs, which enables the architects to use that space functionally to create the double-loaded corridor that you need to have apartments with a hallway in the middle. It also then provides, the ability to, I'll say, give up the square footage to have a nice notch in the building for windows that provide light and air to those units as opposed to a solid wall. Likewise, on the bottom, if you see the very lightest gray shade,
I see it.
Yeah.
I mean,
so-
yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, okay. So it took me a while. One way that helped me to understand as a non-design person was with a hotel, a common hotel obviously has a standard central corridor with hotel rooms on either side. You need those rooms to each be a sort of a minimum depth. You need a, standard width for the hallway. And if the building on one side is 15 feet shorter, those hotel rooms won't be able to be, of a reasonable size to balance out. So it's somewhat that same concept of using that space efficiently to have the double-loaded corridors.
And you've decided to use that additional space with light and air, because if you used it for units, they would not be rentable.
Correct.
Correct.
I just find it amazing that you're gonna have 134 units, but only 8 of them have been identified as affordable. I find that just devastating. I really do.
And I would assume not rentable is really more not rentable at a certain price point more than absolutely not rentable.
Certainly. So I will.
That's not exactly, if I may simplify it, it's like saying, if the requirements of the zoning ordinance had it that a parking spot was only 4 feet wide, except for a motorcycle or some thin certain car, maybe I could lease that parking spot. But to the mayor's point, without the additional space that I have to build, a car's not gonna fit in there. It's not that it's not marketable for a certain amount of money. If your bedrooms are not a certain size, they're just not marketable. If your kitchen is, so it's just a layout. There's just formulas within architecture of how you should have 30 feet and then a corridor and 30 feet. So it's just making the units unmarketable. It's not a matter of the dollars of that they're fancier or nicer units. It's literally just they don't lay out. I mean, as a global comment, it's what's happening, why they're trying to convert office to residential in places where office doesn't work anymore, but it's not working because the floor plates of office are too deep, that there's just too much lost space. So to convert those, you're getting space that's not marketable to anybody. Here we have a different issue. We have a pinch point up at the top that's making this so tight at the top that there's no way to get enough units in there that are marketable that makes it worth it.
Makes sense to me.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm not understanding out of that logic is, don't you have that same problem on levels 1, 2, and 3? How are you solving the problems on levels 1, 2, and 3?
One is retail and commercial. Two can be the same as well, or could be amenity space. And three is not a great, not a great level. I mean, we just have to have that as an inefficient level, or we can step back.
If I can, we can step back, or we can also carve into that footprint down below. In other words, on the bottom left image, where there is white space, which indicates a sort of atrium, I'll call it, a carve out in the building, that carve out could extend down to levels 2 and 3 quite easily.
Okay, I mean, I'll admit, and this may not be really, may not be the answer or the way of the method of analysis that you'd be looking for, but I would certainly say you all asked for and were given the upper right-hand corner, and I assume that somebody at that point, at the time that you were asking for it, would have had a sense that, gee, there's going to be a problem with some rooms that might not have a window. And so, in a sense, what's happening is this is a trade-off that will allow you to sort of bail yourselves out of what may have been a lousy decision 3 years ago. And part of the question that is spurred a little bit by Mr. Payne's comments is, okay, we're supposing we give you this, what are you going to give us?
A building. I mean, we won't be able to build this building, and you're right, Mr. Mayor, perhaps some, additional schematic and due diligence and detailing all of the units at the time would have fettered this out. But what's hard in the SUP process makes it difficult is how much time and effort and money can the development side put into something that's not approved and doesn't know what's being approved to lay out actual units within the building and understand all that. So you have to kind of take this in chunks, and you have to, go through your approvals, understand just initially what density you're getting. Then you need to go sit with your engineering and architecture team and dive deeper into and understand layouts and all of those details and talk to the BAR. And, in my belief, I think that's what we're trying to correct, because after, like you say, 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through, approvals, you still have to go and do detailed stuff, which, comes to this conclusion. And I wish I knew this back then and would have brought up one more thing, but I also don't know if, that detail would have made it into a presentation when we were really talking about overall massing and density just to build residential in Charlottesville, which required the SUP process and still does until anything makes a change.
If I can also add to that, in our early conversations about this with NDS also pointed out that this site was an anomaly that was never studied during the last zoning round. So that there was agreement from the folks that we were meeting with that this makes more sense than the existing zoning. So this wasn't uncovered during the city's initial zoning process the last time the zoning was amended. And this is an anomaly that does not seem to exist anywhere else in the city. And this is an attempt to correct that.
Yeah, it's very...
Well, it may be an attempt to mitigate it. I wouldn't use the word correct there, because it's always been there. it may be a way, it may be an attempt to get you a better building that you think you can sell better, but anyway. So, I mean, frankly, like I say, my suspicion is, and I've been trying to look at your map enough to get a sense of what the distances are. My guess is that you're gonna get more square feet out of it by doing by getting the setbacks than you would give up by putting in the light and air, but I haven't factored in the calculations for what you're doing at the bottom, so I don't wanna be overly presumptuous. I haven't done all the math yet. But I just.
Jeff or Lisa, we have that, I know we did it, and I know that, because I remember that one of our supporting points was, A, we're not getting any additional density, and we're barely getting any more gross buildable square foot, which is what the mayor is talking about, because what this allows us to do is to carve up the building rather than have one big bulky building and shove units into it to max density. It allows us to have those light wells and to shape the building better. And so I believe the gross buildable is not that different. I wish we, because I know Mr. Mayor, he's getting into, I suspect he thinks this is a grab for like more square footage and more money, and it's literally just about, I don't even think we needed to bring this application. I think NDS could have brought it independently and just said, this site is zoned in a manner that it cannot be built efficiently. So regardless of granting anyone an SUP or no one's gonna build this building. It's just not an efficient building. So.
I believe I am looking for those numbers now, and I apologize for not having them on hand.
Yeah.
I believe that an approximate number for what we're looking at is 136,000 square feet, and I'm looking for the number prior to any carving out.
Do you have the thing we presented to NDS? Because I think that's where when we sat with James and Brian, I think that was part of our discussion, that this wasn't about more square footage and profit, as the mayor said. It's just about layouts and.
And I am looking, but I do not have those numbers immediately.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, one of the things that always concerns me when somebody comes back wanting to amend conditions of an SUP, particularly on a project that has already been the subject of a fair amount of rather passionate discussion, both before the Planning Commission and City Council, is I always kind of wonder whether we're getting a bait and switch. And I can't tell from this, but, you know, that's just a suspicion that undergirds a lot of my suspicion about what happens when folks get an SUP and then they want to change the conditions of the SUP.
So is your frustration that maybe it was misrepresented 3 years ago?
No, I don't know. I mean, frankly, it seems to me that somebody looking at the graph, at the image in the upper right-hand corner, would have to say at some point, we're gonna have to figure out how many rooms we're going to build that won't have windows.
So would it have been
And
more?
now they're trying to avoid that result.
So would it have been more, I guess, helpful 3 years ago if they just presented the one below and done it all at one time? Is that what you're saying? Because the point that they're making about the fact that, you know, these designs are, somebody's whistling.
There's a bird somewhere. Keep going.
The fact that this is an iterative process and they would have had to basically work with one volumetric volume that was granted under the original SUP, and as they iterated that over time with their engineers and their architects, I can see very well how they would have gotten to a situation where they are now. I mean, that would meet my own experience with projects. I don't know how we would at this point prove whether it was a bait and switch.
Well,
My question is the project at the bottom a better project than the project at the top? I think the project at the bottom is a better project than the project at the top. Now, whether we want to wrangle some more housing out of this, some more units, that's another question. And maybe they'd be willing to have a further conversation about that. But my concern with that is when this first came to y'all, it wasn't to me, 3 years ago. I don't know, I guess if they're changing some of the parameters and we want to then change some of the parameters about the housing piece of it, maybe that's fair, but the zoning, the housing conversation and all of those things that we're talking about now in terms of inclusionary zoning, that's different than it was 3 years ago. Like you said a minute ago, they could have asked for bonus density. So to me, I just wonder what we're hoping to get out of this. Are we wanting the project to die, or we're wanting something else to happen, or we're trying to be more creative, or?
I've said clearly, we approved an SUP in 2020 after extensive discussion. There are clear expectations. If there's going to be a change in that, I'm happy to approve that, but I think it opens up the conversation that I think it should match our draft inclusionary zoning program, which is an economic analysis done that it is financially feasible. It's meant for projects of this scale. It's the only mechanism to provide housing at 60% AMI or below.
Do they get,
and I think it's appropriate in this case.
Do they get a bonus as part of it? Would that be part of the, I can't recall the language at this point. Would there be a bonus height?
Well, is Councilor Payne suggesting that we would get 3 more floors if we did that?
I don't know. I don't know the language as well as others do. But I guess that is the point. I mean, are we going to
right now? I'm sorry. The adoption that's being, or the zoning that's being considered is the trade-off of providing 3 more floors bonus height, hence more density, and no restriction on the amount of units in exchange for those affordable housing units. I don't think those are the rules in front of us today, which all I can do is operate under the rules that are in front of us today, which is an SUP process that requires affordable housing according to a formula that when you go through the spreadsheet, what I've proffered is better than that formula. The formula doesn't even provide for anything less than 80% AMI. And we're here today, we're discussing it again. It's still the same amount of units. It's still the same building. I can pull out this is not about economics, about making this more profitable and having more square footage. It's about making this a habitable, well-designed building. And I hear you, Mr. Mayor. I wish I saw it all 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and had it all buttoned up real nicely and was able to present everything at once. But there's a lot of moving parts. It takes a lot of risk and a lot of time and dollars to get even through the SUP process and understand what you can build. And I just wasn't that bright 3 years ago to know that I was going to run into this issue until we went, and by the way, we've been going through this process for 9-10 months. So it's not like I discovered it yesterday. I mean, we've been working diligently, have preliminary site plan approval, and I wish I could do it all up front. I wish I had that magic, but I just didn't. And so I'm here trying to build the best building I can. It's not about more units. It's not about more dollars. And I just don't think if we want to operate into what's proposed, I just don't think those are the rules in front of us. I don't think we can just have 3 more stories and deal with affordable that way.
Except, of course, what you're asking for is for us to waive the rules in front of us.
Well, I'm asking for an architectural change that the BAR understands and the Planning Commission understands as to a design element. I'm not asking for density. This doesn't provide any additional hardship to the city. We did shadow studies. It doesn't increase the shadows on the neighboring land. So it's not anything that has any detriment to the city or the community. It's simply a design element that needs to be addressed. That James Freeze and Brian Haluska, I wish they were there, understand that this site is actually an anomaly and unique within the city, that any other site that has a 25-foot step back has 0 on the other side in order to make that top level marketable and design oriented. So this thing about bait and switch and all, it's you know, it gets me a little, because this is not about a city community. This is simply about a design and architectural that everyone from the architectural field and the NDS understand needs to be remedied.
So are we moving this to the consent agenda?
If I could point out two things, excuse me.
Sure.
Go ahead.
2 points. One is, we certainly hear you on the comments on affordable housing. The conditions that were voluntarily offered by Mr. Levine at the original approval do provide for more affordable units that then are required under the existing ordinance. It also provides for, as he noted, affordable units at much more affordable levels. Some of them are at 80%, some of them are at 60%, and 2 of them are at 50% AMI. It also provides for them to be affordable for longer terms than is required by the existing ordinance. So I just want to point that out. That was
For 8 years and 6, most of them at 8 years and 2 of them at 16.
correct. And that is, under the existing ordinance, I believe it would have been 4 units that are required. And again, that's today's rules under affordable housing. 4 units, 5 years or 10 years at most, at 80% AMI, all of them. So
My suggestion would be if we could move this to 2 weeks from now when we meet again, not on the consent agenda, but as a regular order of business.
Okay.
And maybe amongst the 5 of us between now and then, we can have some more conversations. To me, well, I've sort of already said how I feel. I think if there were a certain set of expectations that were laid out at one point, changing the rules of the game now is hard. So that's my opinion.
Well, what he's asking for, what I hear is that the step backs are gonna give them a more commodious building internally for the residents. And that's what he's saying. He's addressed the concern as best he can as it relates to the children that are coming and going for the various activities that they do in the summer. And as a developer, I'm sure he's very concerned that no one is injured due to lack of whatever. Yes, he's giving more units, and that's fine. I just find that that's a very low number, but he's doing more than he's supposed to do, so what can you say? You know, that's my issue.
Is this one reading?
No.
No, one of 2.
if any of you all are interested, we did include with our application materials a 5 or 6 page narrative explaining how the step backs on this particular parcel are an anomaly. I didn't get into that tonight because I didn't realize it would be relevant. But if I may, if you're interested, I believe that was in your materials. If not, I'm happy, obviously, to share it.
Valerie, I think that we understand, you know,
We got it.
that it's unique, and South Street is the only other place has. I think it's a philosophical question from some counselors as to whether we feel like city council is giving you all some extra footage that could be leasable, and that we should get more for that. And others said that, okay, well, that was done in 2020, and they shouldn't do that. I mean, be held to a different standard now. And so, I mean, that's kind of where we are. And I'm not sure if we're going to resolve it tonight or 2 weeks. I wish we could just vote on it and kind of deal with it. But I guess we have to do this again in 2 weeks. I hope that, you know, we have a, you know, clear message so that we don't go through this again. We can just, you know, vote on it. But I'm prepared to support it, but I understand what my fellow councilors are saying, and I think we're probably going to get a wave of these type of things before we approve the zoning ordinance, and we just need to look at them case by case and know that this is kind of what's going to happen as they try to, get things under the wire. So that's where I am on it.
So we have 1 in favor, 2 in favor, 1 opposed.
Go for it, as long as no children are injured, go for it. You
All
know.
right. Well, I mean, I guess the answer then would be let's give it.
I don't have a problem having it not be on the consent agenda. We don't have to always have everything on the consent
Right.
agenda the second.
No,
And so
I asked the question, if it would be. I have no
Yeah.
problems with it being a regular
Because-
agenda item. I have no problems with
Right,
that at
right.
all.
So I guess my only thing, Mr. Mayor, is oftentimes in the 2 weeks between meetings, conversations we have amongst ourselves, one-on-one, I learn things from others that inform me. So I think this might be one of those cases where we'll come back 2 weeks from now and we'll all sort of be in a better place, is my sense.
Well, we can either go ahead and call this first reading and send it on for the second reading and a vote next time, or just hold it here for another 2 weeks. And it sounds like if we've got 3 votes, obviously it's not a final vote yet, but 3 votes to ultimately approve it. I suggest we go ahead and call this first reading and send it on to the next meeting for the second reading, and we can, not on the consent agenda, we can continue to have some discussions if we want to.
I'm good with that. We like that. We like
Okay.
that plan.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Okay, let's see. The next item is alternative fuel study. Mr. Williams.
Mayor Snook, members of council, thank you. I know it's been a long day, so we're going to try to keep this as concise as we possibly can. But wanted to bring council and the greater Charlottesville region up to date on our alternative fuel study. I consider this to be a milestone moment. 11 months ago when we started down this process, it was just a study directed just by CAT. Since that, we did some coordination between other departments. So we added environmental sustainability. They have an environmental piece that's in this study. We also had neighborhood development services. So there was, I believe, a coordinated effort among city departments. We have Kimberly Horn that we hired 11 months ago to pull this together, the same consultant firm that Jaunt used. And we have Mike Sinodecker, the project manager and a licensed engineer that's going to give you the presentation tonight. But I just want to make sure that as we go through this presentation, that you're aware that we are still trying to make sure we get zero emission vehicles as a part of this. But we also want to make sure that ultimately we're going to be reliable, because ultimately that's what's going to make sure that we have the greatest impact on this region. With that, I'm going to bring Mike Sinodecker up to the presentation.
Thank you, Garland. Thank you for having me, Council. Good evening. So as Garland mentioned, my name is Mike Sinodecker. I'm with Kimberly Horn, consultant on the project. Where we've been over the last, we'll call it year at this point, is outlining a study that looks at numerical analysis. It factors into industry best practices, but also the context of Charlottesville, the unique operating environment in which CAT needs to operate day in, day out to deliver service to the residents of this community. So I guess I have to ask to advance slides, please.
There's a remote on the shelf right there next to you.
Very good. So where we are here today is to give you an update. You've heard a little bit from Garland previously. We'll have this opportunity for you to ask questions and providing a perspective from what you've heard and what you see tonight. And where we're headed. we are at the milestone of completing our feasibility. And when I mean feasibility, I truly mean that. We do not have a recommendation yet. This is determining what we can do, what is capable, how do we get to zero emissions, what are the different options available, what are the levers we can push and pull. That's the part of the good study. We want to be thorough. We don't want to have any type of assumption before getting into this. So where we are is after we get through this part of the process, we'll move into our space program, which is looking at the facility that supports the buses. That's down to the south. And we'll move through the process of preliminary layout of what that facility needs to look like, what are the components, and getting a better sense of the cost of that facility and the timeline that that facility can change to support low and zero emissions vehicles. Then by the end of this year, in the fall, we're targeting the completion of a zero emissions bus transition plan. And that is your tool to go after grant funding in the upcoming cycles. Ideally, you have that by the end of this year. It's something that you all are comfortable with, and you can take to the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, DRPT, to secure funding from either them and or the federal government. All right, so I want to handle a couple bits of background information, higher level stuff to keep people in terms of what this means, why we're doing this, what's the purpose of the study. So as Garland alluded to, we are trying to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, GHG, by 45% by 2030 with net neutrality by 2050. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to get to. And again, the scenarios we've developed are working towards that. We know that there is substantial funding available from federal and local and state sources. A combination of them are available, and we want to take advantage of that to the best of our ability while we are working towards those goals. And when we also know that just in general, the industry is moving towards low and zero emissions vehicles. It's happening in our consumer markets. It's happening in our heavy duty markets as well. So the basis of our analysis falls back on the system optimization plan. This was completed, and this is what we are using as a baseline of assessment for the routes and the requirements of the system. Good planning says we should design a system that meets the needs of our community first, and then work with technology in order to implement that system. That's a process we took, and that's where we're building off the system optimization plan. So the numbers you see are based on that plan in the future. We are looking ahead to that and trying to build a system around that need. Some of the factors that went into the study are shown up here. I don't want to go through each one of them. The critical ones to point out are A, the resources, what's it going to cost, the staffing and the time it takes to implement it, that's operations, and then sustainability. What are we getting out of this? What are the benefits? How are we benefiting our community and the climate? Within these factors are elements such as training our existing staff and educating our workforce, not trying to find new workforce. It's factors like, obviously, costs, capital, and operating costs. What are you going to pay tomorrow and then in 15 years from now? We also need to make sure it's technically feasible. We want to make sure that what we propose can be done, and that's important. And it can be done in a way that is reliable, as Garland had alluded to. The reliability of a transit system is the success of a transit system. And that we don't want to lose sight of that as we move through our recommendation phase later on. All right, so now I'm going to touch a little bit on the feasibility pieces and give some language to folks. So to clarify what I mean by zero emissions, on the left-hand side are two technologies that you all are hopefully familiar with. Internal combustion engines are your gasoline, your diesel, your natural gas, and renewable natural gas vehicles. Then you have your hybrid electric vehicle, which CAT does have a couple vehicles within the fleet. These are emitting vehicles that also have a battery on board that allow them to take advantage of regenerative braking and provide a little extra help when lifting or pulling away from a stop. It's a much more fuel-efficient vehicle, and you realize savings there from an economy standpoint. On the right-hand side are the zero-emissions vehicles that we're considering. Battery electric vehicles, otherwise known as just EVs, it's what you're familiar with, like a Tesla, something like that. However, we're talking about something substantially larger at 6 to 8 times the amount of power required to move a vehicle like this. And then on the far right is a fuel cell electric vehicle, also known as a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle or simply hydrogen vehicle. I want to dwell on this for 1 second because hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, whenever I use the term hydrogen, people think Hindenburg, right? Oh my gosh, this is really dangerous fuel. That's not quite the case here. There is no combustion that occurs on a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. It is all electrochemical, meaning the battery electric and the fuel cell electric vehicles are very similar in terms of their drivetrain and their systems. The difference is there's a fuel cell on board which converts hydrogen into electricity that charges a battery. The actual numerical difference here, a battery electric vehicle could have anywhere around 400 to 500 kilowatt hours on board. A fuel cell electric vehicle has a battery that may be 50 kilowatt hours. And then the rest of it, that differential is charged with the hydrogen while the vehicle is in operation. Now, thinking about these different technologies we have available to us, we developed a set of scenarios that we applied to the goals and trying to move the system towards zero emissions. So the different scenarios we came up with are A, currently diesel-only fleet. That is what we are using today. That's what we want to use as a baseline. Then we looked at our battery electric scenarios based on the operational requirements of the system optimization plan and the technology capabilities of battery electric vehicles and the option to do charging en route. We came up with 3 different battery electric scenarios. The first one is a 1.62 to 1 replacement ratio. That means for every 1 diesel bus you have now, we assume that you would be required to buy 1.62 battery electric vehicles to meet the same service requirements of that original diesel vehicle. This is based on analysis of range and the capabilities of battery electric vehicles and looking at the routes and the amount of work that each of the routes need to complete under the system optimization plan. You would have to swap out vehicles on certain routes during the day in order to make sure that the routes are covered for the entirety of the service. And that's where that additional number of vehicles comes from.
Sorry to interrupt.
Please.
That's only for the scenario without fast charging.
Correct. That's all depot charging, where vehicles come back to the facility and they swap out and another one takes its place, and it occurs overnight. The second one is the fast charging scenario. And so while the vehicles still charge at the depot overnight, certain routes can take advantage of fast charging in the middle of the day during layover or schedule adjustment periods where the vehicles will dwell for about 15 minutes, maybe upwards of 20 minutes, say at the downtown transit station, where the vehicle can connect to a power source and quote unquote top off its battery. And then the third one is the 1-to-1 replacement ratio. This is an aspirational scenario, saying if we just replaced 1 battery electric vehicle to 1 diesel vehicle. We want to analyze all of these to consider the upper and the lower bounds in the capabilities of battery electric technology. We know it's changing, but we need to plan for eventualities, changes, or contingencies as the case may be. So we don't want to close our eyes to the options.
In your current scenario, fast charging, what would be the replacement ratio under your current assumptions?
I don't have the exact number. I think it's somewhere close to 1.1. There are a couple routes that wouldn't. We assume the downtown transit hub is the most likely location for a fast charger. There's a couple routes that just don't go there. And so those would still require a vehicle to go out and replace them.
Okay, but about 1.1.
Yeah, it's on the lower end, and you'll see it in the financial component where you can stack up the costs. All right, the other 2 options or the scenarios that we were looking at is hydrogen or fuel cell electric vehicles. Assuming something like this, we would have a hydrogen fueling facility located or co-located with CAT so that way vehicles can fuel as they do now with diesel, except it would be hydrogen. And then CNG, compressed natural gas / RNG. Point of clarification, compressed natural gas, renewable natural gas, it's the exact same vehicle. It's a different fuel source. Compressed natural gas is what you would get out of your gas lines right now at home or wherever. Renewable natural gas is likely something that you would have to contract in order to truck in or source it using credits or some other way to get the carbon offset credits as a result of using renewable natural gas. And I can touch on the differences between those a little bit when we talk about the environmental piece. There's definitely some caveats with that and the calculations of emissions, and I'm happy to get into that later. But here I wanted to outline the scenarios. All right, so the BEV, or the electric vehicle scenarios, need a bit more analysis other than just saying you replace them and this is how much it costs, because we know that range is a limiting factor for battery electric technology. There's a vast number of, not vast, there's a fair number of options available to us in the battery electric realm. What we are using, this 225 mile stated range, is roughly a 440 kilowatt battery on board a vehicle. Most every bus manufacturer has one of these, as do the ones on your current state contract. We're using that because that's what we are seeing deployed elsewhere, and that's what has the most availability in the market. Please.
Would you prefer questions at the end or just? As you
If they're brief questions, I'm happy to take them. If they're more involved, probably best at the end.
Okay. Maybe this is brief. I mean, at the end of your presentation, it references that there are battery electric vehicles with ranges of like up to 350.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go just into a little bit more depth in terms of what's leading you to use that 225 max range as opposed to the 350 product? Is it what's going on in the market that?
Sure. So not every manufacturer has that 350 mile range. Something to consider with regards to replacing transit vehicles is you're subject to the contracts available to you if you're trying to offset it using grant funding or funding available from the federal government. So if the vehicle is not on your procurement contract, it becomes much more expensive to procure, or you have less availability to get to it. The reason we use the 225 mile is the vehicles on your contract, as well as other ones available in the market, all pretty much have that available. It's also meeting that like middle ground range of this is where most of your routes kind of fall. And on the upper end, you could get vehicles with larger batteries. They do cost more, they do weigh more, and you'd actually have a reduced passenger capacity the more batteries you pack onto a vehicle. So that's kind of the short of it. If there are follow-on questions, I can get into it more.
Sure. That's enough for now.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so what we're looking at here is based on the routes in the system optimization plan and how much work is required for that vehicle to complete that, and then considering the stated range, and then on top of that, a reduction of 30 to 40% off the top of the range. And why we do this reduction is based on studies that are completed on agencies that have deployed battery electric vehicles, industry and laboratory reports. There is evidence to support that 30 to 40% reduction as a result of additional topography, vehicle weight, as well as the biggest one, which is temperature. Ambient temperature drastically affects the range of a battery electric vehicle. So in the winter, vehicles will reduce about 30% of their top range. They can't deliver the same amount of power that they can, say, during the fall or spring. A battery electric vehicle wants it to be about room temperature outside all the time. So you get outside of that, you're running your AC more, you're running your heating more, and the batteries themselves are less efficient. And so we applied that reasoning to, or applied that analysis to your routes. And what you're seeing here on the left-hand side are routes that are congruent with battery electric technology in that range, everything in the green. In the yellow, it gets kind of tricky. You might have some days in the winter, on the hottest days in the summer, where vehicles can't complete the routes. And then in the red, these are routes that are unlikely to be congruent with battery electric technology. They're going to struggle even during ideal operating conditions, depending on the vehicle load, or if they're able to travel a route that has less topography, anything like that, that all weighs into it. And so why we did this is just simplify of how quickly can you actually get today's battery electric technology onto these routes, and then where are the challenges going to be. I want to make sure that we're not saying this isn't infeasible. This is just the limitations of the technology, and we have to be realistic about that so that way we can deploy our service day in and day out. This is just a simplification of the bar chart you saw previously with the names of the routes on the left-hand side. The routes that we think, based on the analysis, that are relatively incongruent are the 1, 5, 7, 8, and 11. Those are going to struggle to transition to battery electric technology in the near to probably mid-term, so within 5 to 10 years, depending on what can actually be acquired or procured through your contracts.
And is the potential inclusive of assuming like a fast charger was installed?
So these are just based on the capabilities, the onboard battery. So this is, we'll call this the full depot scenario. The fast chargers, I would have to take a look back to see which routes don't actually access the fast charger. right. So now we have a sense of what is capable with all the different technologies, the options we have available to us. The other piece of this is replacing your existing vehicles. Because your vehicles are purchased with federal funds, they need to reach their useful life in order for the federal government to say, okay, we're willing to give you more money to replace them. These vehicles are on a schedule, and it isn't just a matter of going out and buying more, it's a matter of reaching the useful life balance of the vehicle. And so we developed scenarios. I'm going to take a drink of water here. We developed scenarios that indicate the fastest you can transition your fleet based on the useful life requirements from FTA. So this first chart is a combination of hydrogen, CNG, and BEV with fast charging scenarios. Essentially, what we're saying is this is the lower bound of how many vehicles you need and the upper bound of how quickly you could do it, I suppose. What you see here in the blue is your diesel fleet in the dark blue, and the light blue is a battery electric fleet. We have 2 battery electric vehicles that were requested. Was the funding awarded for that, Garland?
We took the opportunity to apply for funding for 2 battery electric vehicles. At this point in time, the CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, has authorized us. We're just waiting on federal funding. Hopefully that gets awarded in September or October.
Thank you, Garland. So assuming that funding is awarded and granted, you'll have 2 battery electric vehicles in your fleet, and that's that very light blue. And then the green, where you see starting in 2028, roughly if I can read from here, that's when the very soonest we believe that you can start implementing zero emissions vehicles. And then the way this graph works is over time, year by year, when vehicles age out of the fleet, that's when we assume you can start replacing it with a battery electric, hydrogen, or other zero emissions vehicle.
So, quick question. So,
Please.
Does the federal guidelines change, as far as the life of the vehicle, based on the new technology, with that is?
I have not seen I have not seen their parameters change. The parameters are still 12 years and 500,000 miles. We have to meet not one, but both before we're able to replace it.
So it's whatever's the longest, basically. Takes the longest?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yes. So it could be, yes, whatever takes the longest, yes. So if it takes us 14 years to get to 500,000
Right.
miles, we have to keep that vehicle 14 years.
So do you presume that the 2 little electric buses in 2025 would be on one of the routes that you think will sustain electric buses the best?
So what we haven't fully fleshed out what a plan would be for how those vehicles are, frankly, tested. The idea of getting those now is to test them on the system and get real field data to say this is how this vehicle performs in your operating environment. So we haven't worked through this, but my recommendation would probably be testing it on different. Go ahead, Garland.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. But we are required by the federal government to rotate the vehicles. So we cannot keep it on one particular route because there may be a disparate impact to a particular community. Because we are leaving the bus in a affluent neighborhood. We must rotate our buses. So that is a requirement that FTA has us to do. So we will be testing it basing on all of our routes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this might be an opportunity to bring up the idea that if you had vehicles with different battery capacities on board, this is one of the struggles you have with that disparate, that difference in your fleet is if you have half your fleet that can meet 80% of your routes, and then the other half meets the final 20%, as you rotate them around and try to wear those vehicles differently, or if one has to go out of service or maintenance or anything like that, now your operations are going to struggle to move around those pieces to make sure that large battery vehicle is on the most demanding route, when in reality it might need to be rotated out that cycle or something of that nature. Having vehicles with different capabilities drastically increases the operational challenges that you receive day in and day out trying to maintain reliable service. So I'm going to throw up the next chart here. And this is the comparison of battery electric buses without fast charging. This is that 1.62 to 1 replacement ratio that I mentioned previously. And why we have this is the upper bound of potential number of vehicles that would have to be housed at CAT's maintenance facility. Knowing that we have this upper bound, it allows us to plan for, we'll say, a contingency scenario where we might have to maintain a fleet of 94 vehicles in order to keep service operating day in and day out. We're not necessarily saying this is the way it goes, but this is the upper bound that we need to make sure that if we have to, we can accommodate this. All right. Now, I do want to touch on the climate and health assessment. This is an important part of not only the benefits, but also the potential limitations that we experience as a result of our utility providers. So I'll touch on that in just a second. Here you see a chart of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of the different scenarios. And you see the scenarios at the bottom, the colors correspond up top. And we can dig into this a little bit more. Obviously, this is fully explained in our documentation. The key takeaway I want to demonstrate with this graph is for pretty much any technology that relies on electricity, so battery electric vehicles or hydrogen, which is derived from green hydrogen, which is derived through electrolysis, it's dependent on the change of carbon emissions of your electric grid. And so you could have a fleet of 100% battery electric buses today. You are only going to see the global greenhouse benefits of the utility grid changing over time. Your localized benefits would be immediate, but the full system wouldn't be changed until 2050, when Dominion has fully transitioned to net zero emissions. And that is just going to be a limitation of the grid itself and what Dominion or energy providers across the state have committed to doing.
And
please.
Is this graph making any assumptions about our grid? Is it like locking in today's energy grid, or is it just projecting out Dominion's goal?
So this is assuming we start with today's, and then Dominion has a reduction goal in, I forget the exact number, but I believe it's 50% by 2035. So linearly interpolating between there and then between 2030 and 2050, assuming that we also go down to net zero. So it's not just locking in today's grid, it's actually changing over time, and that's what this model is predicting.
Thank you.
The one other line on here that throws folks off usually is that renewable natural gas line, RNG, the light blue line that goes to negative greenhouse gas emissions. This is, I want to be very clear that this is a result of the A-Fleet model, which is a national laboratory develops this model for evaluating emissions in vehicles. The reason that renewable natural gas is viewed as a negative greenhouse gas emission is the model assumes that any of the emissions as a result of methane entering the atmosphere are offset by combusting it and converting it into CO2. Now, I don't want to get too far into the chemistry. What's important to know is the emissions on your streets are the identical same between CNG and RNG, compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas. It's the consideration of global environmental impact if you are capturing methane that otherwise would have been vented, storing it, and then putting it into a vehicle. Methane is 25 or more times more impactful as a greenhouse gas than CO2 is, and that's where this number is derived from, is you're not putting methane into the atmosphere. I know that can be a tricky point, so I'm happy to take a couple questions.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the first hump, the curve goes up. That's because we're wanting to expand the fleet?
Correct. Yes, sir.
To get the additional ridership and the routes?
For all the benefits that come with expanding a fleet, increasing service, accessing other areas.
Okay. So, okay, to get better, we have to get worse, at least for a time. And then the notion is the fully fully BEB fleet is the blue line.
Is the true blue line, not the dark blue line.
Right.
Yep.
You don't have a laser pointer, do you? But is it the one down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Second from the bottom up.
That one.
That one right there.
Thank you.
I do have a laser pointer.
But the green fast charger, green FCEB?
So fuel cell electric bus.
Okay, so that's the hydrogen.
Yes.
I
so-
thought that was like fast charging. That's
No, so
okay,
fast charging.
So that's the hydrogen.
You're going to get essentially the same exact emissions, fast charging, overnight charging, and there's small discrepancy.
FC was for.
Sorry, I apologize. Fuel cell electric vehicle. So green fuel cell electric vehicle is hydrogen produced through electrolysis, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. Gray is steam methane reformation, taking fossilized natural gas and then splitting it into hydrogen and then other hydrocarbons.
So I'm just wondering if you've looked at or considered like alternatives like running the BEVs during peak hours and charging them during the non-peak hours.
So are you suggesting that a mixed fleet, when there's more service running battery electric vehicles and there's less service running another fuel source?
Yes.
So that would be challenging because most of these vehicles do run all day long. The vehicles themselves are out, and actually the drivers swap out in the field on the route, and then the vehicle keeps going because it's where it needs to be. And so the number of the fleet at that point, you'd have to double the size of the fleet as well to have both of the technologies.
And Garland, you may have already told us this at some point, but for our fleet, what do we typically reach first, the 12 years or the 500K?
We surpassed the 12 years because we can't get to the 500K. We have the majority of our fleet right now are more than 14 years old. Most of them, we have 10 hybrid vehicles. Most of them are still 60 to 70,000 miles away, 14, 15 years. We've got to get the additional miles before I can get rid of them.
Because we're a small city, is that
That's
why?
all transit agencies.
It's that-
Remember, we're spending federal money for the majority of the parts, 80%. The state kicks in 16%, and we only pay 4%. So the federal government requires us to get these parameters. They get at least 12 years and 500,000 miles.
Is your question why does it take so long to get the miles?
Because
Yeah, it's getting late, so.
If the question is why is it taking so long, because we've bought, in my humble opinion, we bought experimental vehicles that weren't ready for the prime time, and because of that, we have been hampered with our reliability. Our hybrid vehicles stay in the shop more than they're on the road, and that's the problem with making sure we need to get to zero emissions. But I'm also really concerned about reliability. This region requires that we have a functioning transit system, and we need to be able to do that.
But we're still stuck with them regardless to meet those thresholds, yeah. And that's why in a previous chart, I think you said it would be 2029 before we would be able to make the transition to non-emitting vehicles, and that's because we have to exhaust to meet those thresholds for all other vehicles in our fleet.
Yeah. So that includes also programmed purchases that have already been put through request and are getting funded or have been funded. So those vehicles will be purchased and then delivered. And then, yes, working through the 12-year useful life of the existing vehicles and those planned or programmed replacements that are already within the process of getting funded and replaced. So then, in that time, for example, the 2 battery electric vehicles are actually expansion. Those are additional vehicles on top of the fleet as it stands today.
Okay.
So.
That was our only avenue at this point, because we do not have the transition plan, is that we requested that these vehicles be funded as expansion, and it was granted. Thus far.
I guess I still don't understand the RNG, how it what kind of assumption is being made? Is that like a very optimistic assumption in terms of how fast that technology develops and is adopted?
The
Offset methane production.
yes,
Methane is
I understand that, but like, when is that realistically actually going to happen and be adopted?
If you were able to source RNG immediately, if you found the supply and put it in, that's immediate. It's not that it's a different technology or anything. It's right now, that's how the national laboratory that develops this model accounts for renewable natural gas as a greenhouse gas emitter.
The question I have, maybe Michael as well, is can you even get this? Can you go buy RNG?
You can source RNG, and there are different ways to get there. I will say it's not the easiest thing to source. So I'll give you an example. I'm also doing this type of study for Arlington County. They're installing equipment at their anaerobic wastewater digester, so municipal sewage plant, that will actually capture enough methane from their municipal plant to fuel their entire fleet using renewable natural gas. Otherwise, that would have been flared or exhausted into the atmosphere. And so that's the type of technology we're talking about exists. The quantity out there is not as significant as other fuel sources available. It's not as abundant. It is more challenging to source. You need to find a supplier if you cannot produce it yourself. And as an aside, I believe there was study of how Charlottesville's anaerobic digester can capture and reuse methane. I don't believe that study yielded significant quantities to the point where you would be able to fuel a transit fleet from it. We're talking a very different number of people in Arlington County versus the city of Charlottesville. All right, so I want to hit quickly on carbon monoxide emissions. Burning compressed natural gas or renewable natural gas does increase carbon monoxide emissions, and then obviously your fuel cell and your battery electric go down to zero. That part is relatively straightforward. And then the other emissions associated with the transition, the key ones here to keep an eye out for is the nitrous oxides, and the sulfur oxides, the SOx, which is the light blue. These are components that are commonly seen in smog, and that's the pollutant that we all kind of are familiar with is the ambiguous term smog. The other part to note here is particulate matter. It actually kind of stays regardless of what technology, zero or fossilized fuel. The particulate matter as a result of transit bus emissions comes from braking and tires, and it really doesn't change a whole lot. The difference is battery electric bus and fuel cell electric bus use regenerative braking, which takes away a little bit of that brake wear, but it doesn't mitigate it entirely. And so those don't vary dramatically. All right, getting to our conclusion here, I want to kind of lay side by side the financials and their environmental components, the fleet size. All the scenarios we have are documented in this tabulation. There are a variety of factors that go into this. The important thing to note here is these are planning level costs that you see on the three right-hand side. These are industry costs. They're based on vehicle procurement contracts. They're based on averages across the country. We would have to get through more detailed facility design to know exactly how much your facility would cost. These are ballpark numbers for comparative purposes to line up scenario to scenario. The CNG and RNG is in parentheses, but we put those together because ultimately CNG, RNG rely on much of the same infrastructure and the same vehicles. So I'll pause to see if there are questions or comments.
Can you remind me the battery electrical low estimate? What is that?
That is assuming 1-to-1, one diesel is replaced with one battery electric vehicle, and it's an optimistic scenario saying that the technology will advance and solve the range problems as we need to purchase them. That is our ultimate lower bound for battery electric technology.
So it would be, for all of the buses, $83 million?
Under the battery electric scenario that requires the 1.62 to 1 replacement ratio, if we were to use the range capabilities from this analysis, 94 vehicles would cost $83.5 million in today's money.
And the 6.3 is what it would take you to upgrade the current facility?
That would be, yes, installing the charger equipment at the facility. That does not account for potential utility costs, which are unknown until we get through a further stage of design.
So going forward in year 2, you'd have an additional $1 million for operation, i.e. fuel and maintenance.
Yeah, so sort of. That would be your annual cost to operate the fleet with the level of service you have today, year over year. The 83.5 and the 83.5 would be spread over the duration of procuring those vehicles. The 6.3 of the facility would be when you're moving through the facility design and construction process.
So you don't ever replace the batteries, you would replace the bus at 12 years and 500,000 miles?
No,
So-
we replace the batteries.
Well, yeah, that's developing in the field. So vehicles in the past, older battery electric vehicles are needing to experience a midlife overhaul and replace their batteries. Manufacturers today recognize that agencies want to keep their vehicles for 12 years, and they're offering 12-year warranties on their batteries, but the stipulations are relatively tight with those warranties, and you can find yourself out of warranty very easily. And so, frankly, that is something that is developing, and I don't have a good answer for you yet if in the future you will or won't have to replace batteries.
So how much does a battery cost?
It could be roughly half as much as 60% of the purchase price of the vehicle. So a battery electric bus costs anywhere between $1 to $1.1 million. That would result, $500,000 to maybe $600,000
For a set of batteries.
for the batteries. Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess my question would be for, just to sort of, maybe this is already included, but I don't think
Sure.
so. In your operational cost, fuel and maintenance, shouldn't you already go ahead and be baking in the expected cost of replacing the batteries?
We don't expect it. We don't know yet.
We have some sense, you just said that, I mean, maybe if you just took like a third of the number for walking around purposes. I'm just trying to get something where you can like look at things and say, this is apples to apples.
You want us to give a planning level cost for what replacement? We can do that, but we're hoping that the technology has advanced enough that we can get at least to that 12-year mark. Assuming we don't, we'll probably give you a smaller number to say a portion of our fleet won't make it. But just for example purposes, right now, our battery electric, our hybrid vehicles right now, when we replace a set of batteries, smaller amount of batteries, it costs us about $125,000 to replace a set of batteries. Each one of those vehicles has gone through one set, and most of them are approaching a second set just to get rid of them. At another $125,000.
And the vehicle cost here that's not all being borne by the city, right?
It would be dependent on the grant funding that you can
that's
access.
the cost of the vehicles in
That is just side by side the cost of the vehicles.
So ours would be
total
like
purchase.
10% of that or whatever.
It depends on the grant program.
I'm just sort of doing
Yeah,
this.
the most optimistic would be if the federal government decides to continue to fund zero emissions vehicles after the next 2 years. There's only 2 more years of available funding for the low-no emissions program, which is the most beneficial one. That's the one that provides 90% of the cost of vehicles and facility and all that. That only has 2 more years of secured funding. It's unclear whether Congress will continue that level of funding in the future. On the other side, if we talk about your regular purchasing, it's about 50%. You could get up to 68% depending on how many vehicles you purchase and whatnot, but it's more like half.
My point is that vehicle cost of, say, 56 million, close to 60 million with the battery electric with fast charging, that's not all going to I don't know what's up with these. That's not all going. The city's not going to be writing a check for that amount of money. It's going to be writing a check for a percentage of that.
Yeah, it would be, using a rough estimate, probably close to half, and then over the course of multiple years.
Okay.
So Garland would have to come back and ask you for more, a certain amount every year.
I don't want to steal your thunder. Are you almost done with?
Yeah, we're basically at the conclusion here. Yeah.
So I guess as I look through this, to me, hydrogen in terms of like getting it here and finding a reliable source, that seems iffy. RNG sounds great. I'm on the Ravenna Water and Sewer Board, but I don't think we have enough goodie to be able to supply. The CNG won't get us where we need to be in terms of our climate goals. to me, the battery electric with fast charging splits the difference. You're not buying all those extra buses. You're hedging your bets, your future you're hedging your future investment in your rolling stock by investing in a piece of technology in one location where you can actually do the fast charging. And if the cost of that investment's $6 million or something, to me, that might be something that goes on the CIP. And then what doesn't make sense to me is, buying 94 buses. I realize you only have it up there for like a comparison case.
Correct.
Anyway,
And
that's
we don't
my-
have anywhere to put 94 buses.
No, you don't.
That's a key component. Some of these numbers, like a 94 CATS facility, will not support that.
Right.
But one of the also things that I want to make sure that we're not shutting off any of our options right now. We're not asking council to make any decisions tonight. We wanted to bring you information in the next 90 days or so. We will come back with a recommendation. We are going to take a look at all of the fuel types. Hydrogen does have a cachet about it, but it also has a reliability issue that gets us the range we need. So that's part of what we want to make sure.
Yeah, and I can expand on hydrogen a bit more. I glazed it in this presentation. It's much more detailed in the report. Something to consider is the federal government is investing billions of dollars, on the order of 13.8, I believe, billion dollars in hydrogen infrastructure to fund the Hydrogen Hub program, which will select 8 sites across the United States to build a production, storage, distribution, and end-use environment for hydrogen as a fuel in the United States, and that is across the country. That program received their, I believe their proposals went in, I believe they went in April of last year, and they moved through the second round this year. So we should be hearing, I think, by the end of the year, where those locations will be in the United States. One of the closest ones is in the Maryland, West Virginia, Pennsylvania area, give or take, which could put a reliable and sustainable source of hydrogen fuel within reach of this system.
What's the cost of the fast charging station?
The fast charger itself, on the order of $1 million for a fast charger, depending on your land costs, and that also factors into it. That's not included. And then if you have multiple positions, the cost would go up. And then if you had to install a utility transformer or do any line upgrades, that's something else to consider. That could incur additional costs from the utility, and that would have to be something that's looked at more closely.
So that's not a part of the grant, that's a part of the municipality?
No, you could get grant funding to support that as well.
Gotcha.
And if you had multiple mid-route chargers, would that basically be the same thing as when I've read about localities that have like a mid-route charging infrastructure? That's basically what that would be.
Yeah, essentially, they top off for their 15 minutes while they adjust their schedule, or there are definitely considerations that go with that. There's operational complications to make sure they have enough time. And then the other piece of this is now you're maintaining a high voltage asset out in the field that does require a bit more, say, facilities maintenance or staff time to make sure that if it were to go down, that's a critical piece of infrastructure, because if that's no longer operational, your routes can't complete their day. And you may or may not have contingency vehicles enough to come in and back them up. So it's an operational concern, and it is a risk.
Mm-hmm. How reliable or how much history do we have, and does the industry have with hydrogen-powered fuel cell FCEB buses? I mean, the BEBs seem already kind of cutting edge as it is. Now we're talking about a hydrogen powered bus. I mean, how long have they been out there, and how reliable are they?
So it's multifaceted question. Hydrogen technology has been used since we went to the moon. That's the buzz thing, is that's what powered the lunar lander, was a hydrogen fuel cell. That's relatively reliable, and it's used widely across multiple industries. It's more about making sure you have the infrastructure set up. That's the key consideration with hydrogen, is getting hydrogen. Battery electric and hydrogen buses, yes, they are cutting edge. There are deployments out there. Many agencies that were early adopters of battery electric vehicles are actually now trying fuel cell electric vehicles just because they have struggled with range, and now they're trying to figure out how they could potentially get a mix of fleet or something of that nature. But the reality is it is developing. It is still new in the heavy duty environment. The good news is for battery electric technologies, now we have consumer market that's relying much more heavily on it. And so the technology, the skills, the trades that all go with it are now becoming a little bit more common. And that's one of the considerations we haven't really dwelled on in this conversation is the workforce component. Getting people that can work on these vehicles and service them is even more so difficult than just getting diesel mechanics now, which is already a very challenging process.
So my
Yes.
question or comment is that, Garland, that you come back to us with recommendations. My concern would be that all of this, sounds good and it's allowed a new buzz, but that it still seems to be a reliability, and some of the things have not worked out. Because even if we have to, pay for a replacement battery, and they could go to $500,000, even if we have to pay a percentage of that, that is less money that we have for affordable housing, for workforce development, for other things. And I just don't want to throw money and do these things to say, hey, we're doing these things, we're clean. I want to, whatever I would like for you, when you come to us with a recommendation, that if you could check with your colleagues in other cities and say, that have it, what are their experience with it? And kind of similar to Charlottesville, like today it was really hot and muggy out there, and so the AC would have been kicking really high, and, so things like that, really consider that, because I just don't want to throw money out to say that, because if it's not reliable, then people won't use it, and we'll have clean buses
that are empty.
that'll be empty.
Right. So, thank you, Vice Mayor Wade. Part of what we are trying to make sure that we do is be good stewards of the public dollar. So when the recommendation that we bring back to you, we're hopefully going to exhaust all of our options as a group. We're gonna, the next piece is to bring in the public and have some robust conversations about how do we get to that, zero emissions piece in the most efficient way, but also making sure that we keep primary in our sites reliability. Also the costs. It's great to say that we're going to do battery electric. All of the transit agencies are struggling with the reliability issue. Technology is getting better, but we have a responsibility right now to be reliable. So the recommendation that we're going to bring to you will show how we can make that transition, but also majorly factoring in reliability.
Quick question for the CNG, RNG, for the RNG component in terms of costs, if you were to assume, there was no local regional source for it and it was being purchased and procured, does that substantially change the cost?
Yeah, it increases absolutely. The fact of the matter is we don't have a cost for that. We don't have a source. We haven't gone to that level of detail of actually contacting producers. So the understanding is it would be more expensive, of course, because you have to truck it in specifically. It's not coming from your distribution grid. And that's one of the advantages of CNG is you're getting it from your existing utility system.
But CNG gives no benefit to climate, right?
Marginal benefit, yeah. It is a step. It does reduce other pollutants. It is cleaner, and it doesn't add as much particulate, and especially the big one there is sulfur. Sulfur is a very extreme health pollutant, and it cuts that down dramatically.
One of the things I wanted to make sure that everyone understands, and especially the general public, is that we're trying to get to zero emissions by 2050, right? That's the goal of everyone. if that is the true model, what I'm trying to convey is that our whole fleet would turn over twice. So even if we were to do an interim so we can get the reliability of CNG, I'm not saying that we should, but I'm saying if we did, that 15-year window of getting the cost of that factored in to depreciate it, we can get rid of that technology when the battery technology or hydrogen comes to it and it's sustainable now, but we have also become cleaner, and we can also project the reliability we need as we're making the transition. So I'm not trying to, at this point, we're not trying to pull anything off the table. We just want to make sure we knock around all of the ideas, because remember, transit is effective when we are reliable. We can take people out of their cars, put them on the bus. We have a greater impact on the region if we can get people to use a reliable system first.
I guess just thinking out loud, I mean, I guess hearing this, my thought is, it seems to me, I guess the options that have the least uncertainty are battery electric with fast charging or CNG. RNG and hydrogen, there's just so many unknowns completely out of our control, in my mind, that make it hard for me to figure out like how we would project out or move in that option. To me, it seems like the most realistic comes in battery electric without fast charging. Doesn't make any sense to me. It kind of comes down to battery electric with fast charging and CNG as the core possible paths to go down. And the big question I have is just all around like the opportunity cost of, especially if you think, even at 5-year time horizon, the battery electric vehicle technology will continue to advance, and kind of the opportunity cost of, because we have to use them for so long, if we transition to CNG, we may have locked in, stopping us from transitioning to battery electric vehicles for 10 plus years longer than we needed to. The flip side, having the strongest argument, the flip side, okay, but you might have locked in, if that doesn't happen, an unreliable system that you're not willing to fund to afford, and the impact that'll have on ridership and even that climate emissions perspective. But to me, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like the technology is advancing so rapidly. I just worry about the opportunity cost of delaying a transition to battery electric vehicles for 10 years beyond where the technology may have reached, as well as, is there any opportunity cost in terms of anything we do in terms of ending our ability to access some of the federal money through the Inflation Reduction or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that realistically will run out in a couple of years? And I don't know if any of these scenarios kind of foreclose our opportunity to pursue those funding sources.
I gather that you will give us more information in about 3 months that might help us figure some of this out.
We'll be coming back to you hopefully in 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
That's the goal. We just gave ourselves 90 days in case we need to do more rounds of analysis, because hydrogen is one of those things that all of the technologies are rapidly developing. And today we actually heard a presentation from a group that's marketing and the infrastructure of hydrogen, and they talked about they would come in and help build the hydrogen facilities here. So as we continue to do our due diligence, that is going to change the model, and we'll bring back a recommendation that is vetted well by all the groups.
I'm conscious of the fact that it's about 10 o'clock here, and we have already had an acknowledgement that they will give us more information that will get us closer to a decision in a couple of months. So thank you. It's been very informative and a great start on the issue.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Council.
So, folks, we have one more issue that got added at the last minute because of the events of today.
Yes, Council. This morning, staff arrived at City Hall and discovered a leak in the building, and it was a very, very damaging situation, consuming much of my day, I must say. There was a water leak on the second.
this job, right?
I did. But this is the current job that I'm still doing, so it still would have been what I had to deal with. The second floor maintained much of the issue to begin with, but it did serious damage down below. The City Hall lobby is unusable at this time. We closed City Hall today. We have extended that closure for tomorrow, no public access, while we work on a plan for allowing the public to re-engage with city services. At this moment, we are setting up a temporary front desk for the treasurer's office within the Parks and Rec office, and we hope to open the upper level of the Downtown Transit Center for the Commissioner of Revenue's front desk as well. Both of those announcements will be made at some point tomorrow as to what time those services will be restored. Staff will be working in a remote posture for the next couple of days, but the damage is significant. The item before you is to approve an emergency matter of $1.5 million to make sure that we have the resources available to take the various projects forward in bringing this space back online as soon as possible. The lobby area is already slated for renovation. One of the scenarios that the team will be looking at is, do we accelerate that particular project at the time that we're doing this, which means we have to find the more extensive temporary situation to support operations elsewhere. But ideally, we just wanted to make sure that you were aware that the goal would be to get this work done as soon as possible. The team has already been working feverishly all day. We had a professional cleaning team on site. It was potable water, so there's no concern of sewer contamination or anything of that nature. But the site will be treated. We'll have to replace carpet. We'll probably lost equipment as well because it was all weekend that this was occurring. But we'll hopefully be able to get this under control. This would come out of the CIP contingency. Our insurance agent will be sending over an adjuster tomorrow to walk. As we finish pulling things out, they'll come back and readjust because we expect that will be a significant expenditure. The goal will be, of course, to not use all of this money, but we need to at least have it available to get us moving.
Is this covered under insurance? Like, is it
Yes.
deductible, I guess?
Yeah, there's a deductible. Our deductible is $25,000, I believe, but it goes beyond that, of course. So we'll be getting everything back from them, and that would actually replenish whatever portion we get back. Will replenish what we're asking you to appropriate tonight.
So hopefully this is a cash flow measure rather than
Absolutely.
an actual long-term expenditure.
Ideally, that would be the case, and like I said, if we can work that lobby renovation in right now, we will be using what you've already approved and try to see if we can't reduce our exposure at this time.
So we have a report that included a motion.
It's right here in the.
Somebody like to make it?
Only one question. I mean, is this based off a sense of the extent of damage or just, okay?
Yeah, it's based off the extent of damage that we have just kind of pulled together at this moment, with understanding that we still have to pull things out. And in pulling things out, we anticipate finding more. So we wanted to make sure, because we had a meeting tonight, that we would ask for what we needed at this moment. And again, it won't be used unless it's needed, and then whatever we get back from insurance will replace it.
But not a moonshot number. Okay. Well, I would move to approve the allocation of funds from the Capital Improvement Program contingency account for the City Hall water leak repairs in the amount of $1,500,000.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
And before, Mayor, if I could, before you move on, just to provide you all an update that there was also a leak at Beaufort Middle School. You may have heard about it. You will likely hear about it tomorrow in the paper. It was related to this weekend's torrential downpour. It impacted the band and orchestra rooms. The team is working as hard as they can on that at the same time to ensure that we can try to be ready for school to reopen. We can't guarantee that there won't be some interference with basic flow in the school, but we'll try our best to get that resolved. There's no need for any additional funds at this time. We believe the renovation funds will actually take care of this matter.
Thank you.
Will you all be putting clear notifications on the city's website in terms of where people are supposed to go and, okay.
Right, we'll get that all squared away tomorrow. That's why we're gonna stay closed and allow the team to finish up what they need to do and make the final preparations for that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just even letting people know you're closed tomorrow, I'm
Yes.
assuming you'll do that.
Yes, that'll go out
Okay.
in the morning.
All right, thank you.
So I should note that the motion passed 5-0. Any other business items for consideration tonight? Counselors, any questions for new city manager Sam Sanders to follow up on? Not at this point. Well, with our great thanks to Michael Rogers and good wishes for the future, we are adjourned.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, we have one more public comment period. Community matters, you're right, beg your pardon. You may. Thank you.
No, thank you. Since you are all here, I might just, sorry. No, I just want to say thank you for Garland and Kat's team for the presentation. Briefly, I would like to, in the faith of being good stewards of public money, share a few things that are also very relevant. So, for example, according to Bloomberg, price of a lithium-ion battery per kilowatt hour in 2010 it was $1,191. 2020, 137. Almost 10 times less in 10 years. So when we are talking about some agencies are facing some costs and etc., have that in mind that in 10 years it decreased 10 times. I also wanted to talk that renewable natural gas, it talks about being a technology that actually reduces emissions because the sewer system would be emitting so on, etc. First, we live in a community that in the surrounding county, large part of the population do not have sewer, therefore it's not being collected just like Arlington. But second, as mentioned in this presentation, the strategy used by many of these treatment plants, and I was lucky to visit one about 10 years ago, has been around for over 20 or 30 years, is just to burn the methane. So they're burning the methane right now. So right now, the idea that you're comparing methane with CO2 assumes that these stations are not burning, but they are. So when you consider that, at the very least, if you're being very gracious, RNG should be zero emissions, not negative. And the second thing that I want to mention is that very strategically, when you see the table talking about CNG, in parentheses, RNG, and then it has like the comparison of the reliability, number of buses, and etc., what you didn't find in that table is the expected cost of CNG or RNG as a fuel. So it's impossible to know that right now. And it's expected to be very, very high. So when we're talking about operational costs, that would be very high for RNG. Another something, Vice Mayor Wade asked about the peak hour service. If all buses are running all the time, there is no peak hour service. If there is a peak hour service, that assumes that some buses are running in a certain period of time in the morning and in the late afternoon. That's a basic assumption of peak hour service. So I think the answer did quite match your question. And last thing, the very, very small amount that you're going to be able to use for renewable natural gas, believe me, I bet our neighbor Charlottesville Gas is thinking of using that for them. So as you're talking about RNG being a solution, let's coordinate with them what they're going to be using in their decarbonization plan and what's left for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody online who would like to speak to us, who should do the alternating thing?
We have one raised hand, Joy Johnson.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ms. Johnson.
Okay. Hi. Good evening. My name is Joy Johnson, and I reside at 808C Harder Drive. Mr. Rogers, I just want to say thank you and good luck in your endeavors. Please make sure you stop by the community center before you leave to see me. And thanks, Juan, for doing that plug for West Haven Community Day. If you all have not sent your donation in yet, please do so. The other thing that I do want to really talk about a little bit is what I keep saying every time I call in, is that we need to define affordability. And we need to define affordability from 0 to 80% of the AMI. I appreciate the fact that the presenter earlier said, oh, there are 80%, there's 60%, and there's 50%. And basically, just by that statement, you should realize that there is a population of people that will be left out. And when Mayor Snook asked, what are you getting? You said a building. I think that was a ridiculous answer. So again, I will continue to toot my horn about defining affordability. Thank you, Ms. Perrier, for pointing out that it was in these deals that get made all the time, the affordability for low-income folks, or even people who are making $30,000 or $40,000 who can't find a place to rent or buy in the city of Charlottesville. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thanks again, Mr. Rogers, and congratulations, Sam.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, anybody else? Ms. Cruz?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation. I want to thank Garland and Kat again. That is the first time I've seen multiple scenarios for battery electric buses that were reasonable and not just, we've got to buy 94 buses if we're going to do this. So I appreciated that distinction tonight. I do think there are some assumptions still being made. With CNG, we're talking about, you know, building a whole new facility for CNG and then having to build a facility potentially for battery electric buses if we can't source RNG. And now you're talking about multiple facility costs over time. And right now we know that the gas that Charlottesville Gas currently has is not even enough to supply UVA in the wintertime, and that's why they've had the coal-fired power plant. So how are we going to be sourcing gas for our bus fleet and calling that reliable? Also, the prices for gas have been varying widely. You know, they're subject to global politics, and this is something that has to be thought of in council when we're talking about these things. And let's talk just for a second about hydrogen fuel cells. Right now, the way that hydrogen fuel is produced actually creates more emissions to create that fuel than we're currently creating in our transportation system. So they're trying to figure out ways to do it that's solar-based, but they haven't yet. They're using coal and other technologies. It is a very intensive process, energy-intensive process to create hydrogen fuel. So I'm very concerned about the enthusiasm for becoming a pilot for hydrogen when they haven't even figured out how to make it in a sustainable way yet. So that's just some things I want to throw out there for your consideration. But again, I do appreciate the varying scenarios and appreciate council's attention to the issue. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Anybody else online wishing to talk to us?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Anybody else in person? Now, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.